Hello and welcome. I'm Danica Cullens and I am with Informa. I have the great privilege to work with a wonderful group of leaders that put on this entire event, all the things that are Expo West. And Climate Day is a very big and important part of this event. We're thrilled to have you here and sharing diverse perspectives and really being involved in these very essential conversations that we need in this industry. So thanks for all you're doing to contribute to that. We're thrilled to have you and hope you have a wonderful week. And I'm very excited to bring Courtney back to the stage.
Hi, everybody. I have a feeling that people are going to come in. A lot of people are over in the resource fair right now, so I have a feeling as we get going, more people will come in here. But thank you to Danica. Thank you to New Hope and to Trodden for their support of Climate Day 2025. To set the tone for the afternoon, I just wanted to take a moment to tap us into our collective potential, our potential to resource one another, to learn from each other, to sense what's emerging right now, and to develop new solutions. I don't know about you, but already this morning there have been things I've heard where I've been taking notes like, oh, that's something I need to be paying attention to. I want to move us for a moment into a place of abundance because we do have abundant potential. There's an image I'd invite you to hold in your mind for a moment, to expand your heart and your imagination. For a moment, picture a forest that you love. See the trees, the sunlight filtering through the leaves, feel the wildness, and then zoom in for a moment and imagine a wild beehive. The hive is nestled in a hole in a tree. Imagine what it's like inside a wild hive. It's warm, it's round, it's dynamic, it's thrumming with life. There's a pulse of vitality. A wild hive truly is a superorganism. And while we can study individual bees, they only make sense as part of a greater whole. Biologist Thomas Seeley describes a bee colony as a prime example of this, a system where no single bee can survive alone for long, but together they function as a living entity. The hive regulates temperature, makes collective democratic decisions, and sustains itself through swarm intelligence. Even its physical structure, its honeycomb, the propolis, the nectar and pollen that it collects, is all part of this system that enables it to survive. Each type of bee has its own role in the system, and I want to hone in for a moment on a particular type of bee, a drone bee. So there's three different types. There's the queen bee, the worker bee, and the drone bee. The drone bee are the male bees, and in conventional systems, there's a belief that the drone exists only to mate with the queen. But I want to tell you about something else that's incredible. Not that mating's not incredible, but there's something else that's really cool, which is that the drone bees actually have a critical role in sensing the environment and feeding information back to the hive. So they can go into other hives and come back and feed that information into its hive. So they don't collect pollen or nectar, but this sensing is just as essential for the well-being of the hive. It means that the strength of one hive doesn't just sustain itself. It actually helps strengthen all hives in the surrounding ecosystem. In many ways, this is why we're here at Expo. Like the drones, we're sensing what's emerging, we're taking in information, we're understanding the moment we're in, and we're feeding it back to our communities and our organizations. Our strength comes from our ability to actually sense, understand, and react to what's emerging. When we think about climate action, we must recognize that no single company, organization, or leader can solve these challenges alone. Like the bees that we were envisioning, we must share knowledge, sense shifts in our environment, and create future resilience. And here's the moment we're in. We're halfway through, we're 2025, through the decisive decade for climate action. The science is absolutely, irrefutably clear. We need to cut global emissions nearly in half by 2030 to avoid the worst impacts of climate change. And if we fail, the consequences will be irreversible. And that's why this work must go beyond incrementalism. We need new ways of working. When the Climate Collaborative talks about collaboration across company lines, we don't mean surface-level partnerships that we're so accustomed to. We're talking about something deeper, learning to work differently. And some of these shifts happen within our own organizations and some across industries. But to create innovations that truly serve people and planet, our teams do need to function differently. So this next panel, From Chaos to Coherence, the Aligned Reporting Initiative's work to streamline and standardize sustainability or disclosure, is a fantastic demonstration of this mindset in action. Companies recognized a shared challenge, the overwhelming and often frustrating current state of reporting and disclosure. And they saw that by sitting down, suppliers, distributors, retailers, brands, oftentimes competitors, sitting down and beginning to work on this challenge and look at solutions and determine a pathway forward was one way that they could help to create change. And this change is critical because all of these companies said to us, we want to be spending our time on the actions that matter. We don't want to be spending all of our sustainability team's time on measurement and disclosure because we need to actually be doing the work of reducing emissions. So every panel this afternoon is designed to help you sense the moment we're in, understand what's needed, and act strategically and collectively. Because in this moment, like a wild hive, our strength is in our collective intelligence, our adaptability, and above all, our ability to work as one. And with that, I would love to invite our next panelists up to the stage. Welcome. So it feels like it's full circle to be bringing this panel to Expo West because it was actually a year ago that the seeds of this initiative began here at Expo West in conversations with Sensiba and with Planet Forward. And so much work has happened in that time, and we're really excited to be able to report on what has happened thus far and really the pathway ahead. We have three panelists to help share about this initiative. Julian Gervaux. Julian has 20 years of experience and is sustainability practice leader at Sensiba. He specializes in developing ESG, sustainability, and climate action strategies for mid-market companies. He works with executive leadership teams to assess their sustainability baselines and implement strategies that foster healthy, more resilient entities and drive operational savings. By leveraging global sustainability impact reporting frameworks to identify industry-specific risk and opportunity areas and non-financial key performance indicators, Julian helps companies align their sustainability reporting with financial reporting and proactively respond to stakeholder disclosure requests. In his most recent role as Vice President of Sustainability at Jackson Family Wines, he spearheaded initiatives resulting in more than $26 million in cost savings, as well as setting the company on the path to a net zero future. To my right, Kylan Atkins-Irby. Kylan is the head of growth at Planet Forward, trusted by leading retailers, brands, and suppliers. Planet Forward helps businesses achieve their climate goals with faster, more cost-effective solutions. Their software allows companies to measure and reduce their Scope 1, 2, and 3 emissions and conduct high-quality life cycle assessments, LCAs, at scale. Previously, she worked in ESG investment in private equity at Malk Partners, influencing over $500 billion in assets towards more socially responsible investments. A recognized climate and ESG thought leader, she's spoken at South by Southwest, COP, and New York Climate Week, and was named to the Green Biz 30 Under 30. Nija Zoe. Nija is the principal climate advisor at Whole Foods Market. In this role, she leads the climate and nature programming, specializing in food supply chain sustainability across carbon, water, and biodiversity. Her professional journey includes roles in policy analysis at the United Nations Environmental Program, management consulting at Systemic, and circular economy product engineering at Procter & Gamble. Nija completed her undergraduate degree in cultural anthropology and chemical engineering at the University of Texas and her master's of science in environmental change and an MBA at the University of Oxford. She loves solving interdisciplinary problems and hopes to continue being a lifelong learner across all climate-related fields. So before I hand it over to our panelists, I would like to just do a little bit of work to kind of frame up the initiative here. So where did this initiative begin? It began with the recognition that we have this powerful opportunity to help our community in navigating the burden of information that's being requested and shared across company lines. We knew that there was a better way than the experience of what's called the death by 1,000 cuts right now, that is sustainability reporting. Starting last summer, we convened a steering committee, and as you can see, what's amazing about this is the scope of organizations that have chosen to engage in this. And I think it's really reflective of the nature of the challenge that we're looking at. This steering committee then helped inform the development of a broader working group, which convened in November of 2024 and has been convening since that time. And again, what you can see here is I love that you can have, a retailer like Ashland Food Co-op sitting right next to somebody like a Whole Foods or a Chobani. Again, what's incredible is that it's really a level playing field when you have these sustainability leaders that are all having somewhat of a similar experience. So our goal that we set out was that by April of this year, April 2025, we would identify a pathway or pathways for a streamlined, standardized sustainability disclosure process across the food and grocery industries. And we say food and grocery industries in part because A, not everybody that's engaged is a food company. Also, we have companies that are engaged in food service. This is a similar issue for them. So we had to kind of broaden our lens as far as who was engaged. So, I'm just going to go back for a second because what I'd like to do is actually pause for a moment, and I would love to bring in the voices of our panelists because each of these panelists has been involved in the steering committee and have them actually share a little bit about what they've seen from the role that they play within their organizations. And I think, Julian, I'll start with you. So from the lens of your work at Sensiba, of course, you work with many companies. I was curious if you could talk about how domestic and international disclosure and reporting frameworks are adding to the current reporting challenge.
Sure. Of course. Thank you for convening this. It's been a great exercise thus far, and I'm excited to share with everybody today. I think from our perspective, really what we're seeing over the last 5 or so years is a significant global shift towards greater transparency and greater demand for disclosure of non-financial information. So think of it as sustainability information. It's kind of what you would consider ESG, environmental, social, and governance-related risk factors. And we've seen, the calls for sustainability reporting really start to enter the mainstream across the globe. With everything from global frameworks to regulatory standards in places like California, in the European Union, in Australia, and Asia. And at their core, what we're seeing is that these are effectively financial accounting standards that have a sustainability lens appended to them. One of the leading organizations right now is known as the International Sustainability Standards Board, or ISSB, and that is maintained by the leading global financial accounting standard in the world, IFRS. And ultimately, kind of the adoption of these standards are starting to, they're impacting larger global companies, but they're increasingly beginning to trickle down to the middle market. And at their core, a lot of these standards are really focused on sustainability-related risk and opportunities. So it's looking at how varying different sustainability impacts will have a negative or a positive effect on the future outlook, future cash flows of an organization. And I bring that point up because I think what we're seeing is that increasingly the global community is recognizing that sustainability risk is equivalent to financial risk, and that's an important point to make. I think where the challenge lies is kind of we've entered this death by 1,000 paper cuts situation where for companies, even though these disclosure requests are being levied upon them with the best of intentions, because we need to understand various impacts from climate change to social impacts, they're being done in a disaggregated way. And it's got this overwhelming impact that has essentially taken companies and essentially forced way too much resources to be dedicated to reporting and not enough resource to be actually dedicated to the action and the mitigation work that we really need to do to stem the tide of the things that you were talking about at the beginning of this conversation. So I think that's where companies are being overwhelmed, and I think that's where there's a big challenge, and yet all of this information is crucial to stakeholders across the economy, from investors to regulators to consumers. So for me and for Sensiba and for the companies that we help, it's really how do we help organizations really prioritize the measurement and the disclosure of the most important metrics that really are going to drive impact? How do we do that in a standardized way and reduce reporting burden?
Great, thank you. Kylan, I'm curious because Planet Forward, as a service provider, I mean, you're actually helping companies navigate this. What brought you to be engaged with this initiative?
Well, first of all, I'm so happy that we are here and that, it was a year ago that we were having these conversations and that so many incredible companies have signed on, so it just makes me very, very happy to see the action coming to life. So Planet Forward powers the climate strategies of many top consumer companies, including many of the brands and retailers that are in this room and are present here at Climate Day. Our team and our software helps companies to measure their climate footprint with their reduction strategy, with the communication of those impacts, and also with their reporting. And so because of that, we sit at a really interesting place where we're experiencing the pains that exist across the ecosystem on behalf of our customers. So I'll tell the story of two specific customers to illuminate what those pains are. The first would be Compass Group. Mm-hmm. They're one of the members of the steering committee, and they're a huge global food service company. They are purchasing hundreds of thousands of SKUs per year all around the world, and they have a commitment to achieve a net zero target. As part of that, they have an SBTI goal to reduce their Scope 3 footprint by 30%. And one of the biggest ways for them to do that is to start to collect information related to the emissions reductions that are being achieved by their suppliers. They have over 40,000 global suppliers. That's a huge number of companies to be able to engage with. So you can imagine the proliferation of requests that are starting to come when you have a huge global player like Compass starting to say, hey, what are you doing around emissions reductions? And one of the challenges for them is that of those tens of thousands of suppliers, there's a huge variance in terms of the maturity of their sustainability reporting programs and the resources that they have available to them to actually, respond to and service all of these various requests from buyers. So that's really, the pain point that exists at a buyer level, at a Compass level. I need to achieve an emissions reduction target. I need to do that by engaging my supply chain. Therefore, I need to start engaging in a huge amount of data collection. And then on a very different side of the equation, you have one of our customers, Matriarch Foods. And Anna Hammond, I believe, is here today. And she has an upcycled food product. She wants to get credit as a lower footprint supplier. And she's really top-notch related to her sustainability reporting. She has LCAs for all of her products. However, she's still getting asked by each and every different retailer, each and every different buyer, for her to fill out a survey or a data request template in the specific way that they want to receive the information. And oftentimes getting turned away saying the data that you have isn't right for us, or we need it to look like this. And so that's a lot of burden for her to take on to really be able to tell the really awesome story that she wants to tell. And so you can see how both of those players are really important pieces of the supply chain decarbonization challenge, but they experience very different pains. And so as we started to collect more and more of these stories across our customers, and us as Planet Forward wanting to achieve our goal of decarbonizing supply chains, we knew that we needed to come together and start to collaborate in a pre-competitive way to start to standardize the way that this information is being requested and received so that we can save people time and effort and money. Because really at the end of the day, as Julian said, and as Nisha does every single day, the goal and the purpose of sustainability leaders should be to actually implement improvements to their business and take action, not get buried in reporting frameworks and data requests all day. So it was really important for us to come together as part of this initiative. And it's my hope that the impact of the ASRI is that we can reclaim people's time to be able to actually reinvest in the places that are most important, like taking action.
I really appreciate that. I think that it's so fascinating. We oftentimes miss the fact that people who are leading this work, they're being held accountable to obviously all of these reductions and these engagements or strategies, and yet if you look at the amount of time that they're ending up spending on reporting and disclosure, it's pretty staggering. So Nija, I feel like you have a really unique perspective because of the work that Whole Foods does, and certainly you're a requester of information and sometimes you're a supplier of information. Can you share a little bit about what brought you to the table in the initiative?
Yeah, of course. So like you said, Whole Foods Market has several thousand suppliers in our supply chain, many of whom are taking on their own sustainability programs, right? And we want to make sure that we are capturing all of that information in a thoughtful way. And I think in this role as a retailer, we have really seen one of the biggest challenges that is emerging here is that fundamentally these guidelines and frameworks that we are working on and using to communicate sustainability and report this information was just fundamentally not made for food. It was being built by energy or heavy industry that have really different supply chains than what we experience here in the food system, right? They're much more linear. They have very clear kind of impact categories that are easier to track. And all of those impact categories are aggregated, right, between very few players, a couple of big manufacturing locations or production areas. It's really very centralized. And obviously the food system is so different, right? We have a complex and really beautiful supply chain to bring products from farm to shelf in a lot of ways, right? It's deeply tied to nature, it's regionally specific, and it is powered by a network of hundreds of thousands of producers that are all experts in their own right, that have their own unique way of managing and operating their production, that is informed by years and years, sometimes generations of experience. And so what I'm really excited about in this initiative is the opportunity to get the people in the room that are the experts, right? Those who are working in the food system, those who know the importance of the food system's role in mitigating climate changes. We provide, 33% of global emissions coming from food and agriculture and the food system. The importance of having a seat at the table, and when we aren't able to have one, to build our own, right? And so to come together and really create this North Star agenda. And so what are the frameworks that we, as a team, as a broader food system, want to put in place that is going to be able to Kylan's point and Julian's point, enable action for all of us to be able to make something significant, scalable, that works for us all. And I think, the point here is not to be able to replace necessarily all of the frameworks that Julian brought up. I think we'll have to disagree and commit that some of those we might still have to deal with, no matter how wonderfully this working group works out. But I think really the core of it is to be able to come together and identify what is the path that we, as a food system with our very own special context, want to stand up as an industry, bring that to the table. Because I think the reality is, and this is how it's happening today, right? Like, if we, the experts in the room, are not willing to stand up and lead the change we want to see, someone else will continue doing it for us in a way that just isn't fit for use.
Yeah, you're here on that. So we brought this working group together starting in November, and initially really where we began was listening and sharing, and there was so much expertise from the 20 companies that were in the room. But we knew that we wanted to go broader into the industry and understand the scope of the challenges that folks were facing, where they were requesting information from, what they thought we should be prioritizing, what kind of solutions they thought we should be leaning into. So in January, we launched an industry-wide survey with support from Sensiba, who basically was the technical support system for the survey. So deep thanks to Sensiba for their work on that. And what I wanted to do is just share a little bit about the survey. And in the interest of time, because I think really what you all are here for is actually hearing insights and kind of the path forward, I'm not going to go deep into this, but I will share a QR code at the end. If you would actually like to get a report of the results, we're happy to share it out with folks. So we sent out this industry-wide survey. We had 43 respondents. As you can see here, a large majority of them were actually brands, so 53%. We had 7 retailers, and then from there you can see a mix of suppliers, service providers, nonprofits, and others. We had a great mix of company size. That was really important to us, was to understand how needs and challenges kind of correlate to revenue for companies. And then we were also really interested in their climate program maturity. I know, Kylan, this was something that you brought forward, is helping us understand what's the relationship between a company who might be on the leading edge of this work and their experience and their needs versus somebody who's just kind of exploring in this work. And so we were really thrilled to see that, again, we had a diversity of respondents in terms of their work and their climate program maturity. So what did they tell us they want us to prioritize? And again, I'm not going to unpack all of this, but I do want to just flag a couple of things. So certainly, as we heard this morning and we've heard from the working group, the need for standardization of disclosure requests was really important. Also, improved data collection processes, and then better alignment with global sustainability standards. So these kind of rose to the top. I would say, at least for me and what we had been hearing from the working group, no major surprises there. All these S's today, surprises there. Where they said that support is needed, they said templates for sustainability reports, regulatory updates and compliance checklists, digital tools or software for data collection and reporting. You're seeing kind of some key themes here. All of this information back helped us start inform our thinking about what kind of pathways we wanted to develop to help support people's work. One of the questions we asked them are, what are their top challenges? So resource limitations, that was not surprising at all. In fact, we heard that overwhelmingly from the working group, which was, these are small sustainability teams and they're grossly under-resourced to be navigating. Some of the companies in the group, they might have 15 different reporting platforms that they're actually reporting to. One of the things that was really surprising to me, well, two. One was the difficulty in data collection from suppliers. And we were really curious about this, of why is there such difficulty? And is this just related to the resource limitations? Or is there something else at play? And Julian will be unpacking that in just a moment, because we did get some interesting insights into that. One other thing that I think popped for me was that data accuracy and consistency was actually lower. We had heard at the Climate Collaborative that data accuracy was a real concern. This is not to say it's not a concern, but it wasn't necessarily one of the top concerns for folks. I think, Julian, are we over to you?
Yep.
All right. I will hand it to Julian to share kind of further insights that popped.
Yeah, so the next slide really looks at the question relative to goals related to sustainability and disclosure. And, I think, again, here, I will say that, the top two, I was heartened to see that those are the top two reasons why people are looking to disclose on sustainability, and really kind of that first one, driving innovation, identifying opportunities. I think that really gets to the core of why we practice sustainability, is to leverage that as a strategic advantage. I think there is a tremendous amount of opportunity in the sustainability space from a strategic advantage perspective, and not just a compliance obligation. And I think that gets to really kind of being able to leverage sustainability principles to understand and identify efficiency opportunities. In my career, that's always been an area where you start to see the stars align. Aligning with industry best practices, I think in general, companies really want to benchmark against their peers, against industry standards. And you saw a strong desire from this group to really be in the pack rather than lagging behind. But it also kind of suggests that we are correct in our theory that we need additional support for industry-wide collaboration on standards. Regulatory compliance was third, and I think that that was just kind of speaks to obviously compliance is critical, and if we can align regulatory compliance with voluntary sustainability reporting, that's really the holy grail as I see it. And we have a litany of kind of regulatory reporting requirements globally that are coming down the pike. California, as many of you know, has a climate law coming onto the books in 2026. That's going to be followed probably by, I think, 6 or 7 other state legislatures in this country who are kind of collectively stepping up in lieu of any concerted federal action. So, seeing and aligning reporting standards with regulatory standards, I think, is critical. You look across the pond in the European Union, CSRD, which is implicating a number of different companies as well across the board for sustainability reporting. So compliance is important, obviously. And then the last point I'd make on this slide is leading on climate, that fourth one. This is a big one for brands. I think almost 75% of the brands who responded to this survey recognize the importance of leading on climate for kind of product differentiation. I think that's an important point as we get into some of the outcomes of where we go and rewarding leaders. That's a big one. Moving on to the next slide.
And Julian, I'm thinking in the interest of time, maybe
Sure.
we can just barely touch on this one, although
Yep.
there's a couple of little things. And then let's just share a little bit about barriers. I just want to make sure that we get to pathways, and we're running just a little bit
Yep.
behind.
Yeah. I mean, this just basically said, who are people aligning with, and you have kind of the standard climate platforms, CDP, SBTI, and then the broader ESG platforms, CSRD, GRI, ISSB. The nature-related financial disclosure, I thought that was a really interesting one too, because that's a new and emerging framework that's really focused on nature and biodiversity. And then the next slide, quickly around barriers to information sharing. I think what we saw is a lot of companies are reticent to share information for fear that that data is going to be misrepresented or used against them. So kind of getting into that transparency and data accuracy is a key thing that we obviously need to keep in mind.
Yeah, I thought this was quite interesting. Nisha, I'm curious if you would share a little bit both about some of the incentives, and I apologize, I realize that some of these are cut off, but the types of incentives that people said would best support their companies, and whether there are any surprises there for you, and then we can touch upon just kind of an overview of what we heard from retailers.
Yeah, absolutely. So the kinds of incentives that we saw really stand out fell into two major categories. So things that are going to directly benefit the business, things like merchandising opportunities, preferential contracts, things like that. And then the second category that we saw was really about lowering the barrier in order to do some of that reporting. So better digital tools that streamline data capture, more aligned and less repetitive surveys, things like that. And what I found really interesting about this slide was that, in particular, the incentives versus the willingness to share data, kind of as Julian stated, against all of the barriers to do so, this really interesting kind of chicken and egg situation appears, which I think really is the hallmark that you see right before in systems change, there's a little tipping point, right? And so, if we look at this today, it's really difficult for, we'll call them, a retailer merchant to be able to create some of those preferential contract terms, right? Because one of our producers is using one kind of measurement and another producer is using another kind of measurement, and it's quite difficult to figure out how we kind of fairly create an incentive that plays well to what both of those suppliers are doing on a sustainability front. And so how cool that we are just in this space where they are so interconnected that I think when we are able to make progress on those, we're able to get to a more aligned and streamlined sustainability reporting process. We're able to share a bit more relevant KPIs, how quickly it could follow that we are able to sort out industry-wide incentives and benefits from the business side, from the merchant side. So I thought it was really interesting to see I think at first glance, it's a long list of things we don't all fully have, but I think it's also things that are so intricately connected that progress on one is really going to mean progress on the others.
There's an interesting one that kind of jumped for me, which is the distinction between improved market opportunities and climate-aligned merchandising opportunities. And I think that oftentimes I've assumed that people want climate-aligned merchandising opportunities, but that actually rated much lower than the other ones. So it's just kind of an interesting insight. Yeah. How about just an overview of what we heard from retailers?
Yeah, and I think just like we just covered, retailers are really important in the sustainability disclosure space. As Courtney mentioned at the start, we are both the requesters and the reporters of information, so really play a critical role in being able to streamline and funnel where we can and also create some of those incentives that we want to see in the system. And I think this isn't a new data point for anyone, but 80% of brands report data to the retailers, and then 100% of retailers struggle with that data collection. So clearly, we are all struggling in this space. And a lot of the retailers are facing the exact same issues that the brands are facing. So resource constraints like time, staffing, and funding, and the same desire for data accuracy, consistency, and standardized metrics that we saw in that higher cut of the data. So I think, great data to just support that all of us are in the same boat here, and hopefully forward action on this will benefit everyone.
Yeah, I would definitely just highlight that retailers are a real leverage point to any pathway, anything that we want to be doing here. We need to make sure that we're engaging with our retailer community and that we have their buy-in. So speaking about pathways, I'll hand it over to Kylan to talk a little bit about some pathways that we're starting to scope out for phase 2 of this initiative.
So one of the big focuses for us.
Oh, I think we've lost your audio. Try again. I think we've lost Kylan's audio.
Oh, mine just went up.
Let's see. Try again. No. Bobby, do you want her to go to the mic? Oh,
Perfect.
there we go.
Okay, so I'm really excited. I get to talk about the solutions. So when we brought together this group, one of the key things we said was that we're not here to talk. We're not here to bumble around each other. We want to make sure that there's something really tangible and actionable that comes out of this working group. And so the initial ASRI members have come up with 2 proposed solutions for the solutions to all of the pain points that you just heard about. And so one of the big focuses of the entire group was that these solutions need to be accessible and tangible for all of the different stakeholders that we're representing. And one of the quotes that really stands out to me from our time in the steering committee together was when Gwen Rampton from Compass said, "Okay guys, this is all great, but I understand that maybe my top 50 suppliers have a sustainability team and sustainability reporting structures, but my long tail has never even seen these types of data requests before. They just need education." And so our first solution is an education portal. It's a free resource hub and learning center, which will contain videos, guides, digital tools to help people get up the learning curve related to sustainability reporting and come and have everything they need. So for suppliers who are new to this work, it'll be 101 tools and introductions to different reporting frameworks, testimonials from suppliers who have come up that learning curve and are now seeing fruit from that type of work. For sustainability leaders, it'll be a place where they can come and quickly get up to speed on the myriad of different reporting frameworks that they're now required to comply with, where they can quickly learn what and how they need, how and what they need to do to be in compliance. So that's really one of the first pieces, which we're really excited about. And then the second is the aligned reporting platform. So you can think of this as a common app for collecting and receiving climate data across the supply chain. And what this will be is a group of surveys that are industry-specific and product-specific that'll collect the necessary data that you need for compliance reporting and capturing and sharing emissions reductions. So how we're going to develop these will be with input from climate experts like the Planet Forward team, from broad stakeholder engagement from retailers who we need the buy-in for to make sure that these are going to be fit for the type of information that they need and are requesting, and from industry experts across the board. And then how we'll plan to implement this is by getting broad-based buy-in. So we already have, a really stronghold of the first groups of the ASRI, but the next ask will be for more people to sign on. And so the idea here is very much like the Common App. If you're a supplier and you've signed on to the ASRI, you can complete your aligned reporting platform surveys, and for all of your buyers that have signed on as well, they will accept those. So you can fill something out once and then share it multiple times. And so Courtney will share information at the end for how you guys can get involved, but that's one of our biggest calls to action today and one of our biggest asks is to join the initiative, because it's really, standardization only works if we're all aligned on it, and that's one of the key parts of making this piece successful.
Yeah, I would double click on, there's development work here, and then there's obviously a really strong engagement component that we'll continue to lean into as well, because I think for this to be successful, that's going to be absolutely critical, as Kylan said. So what I would love to do is just take a moment, and I just want to kind of assess where we're at on time. I think we probably have time for each of you to do like a short 2 minutes, just kind of speaking to based on what Kylan shared, and I can go back just to kind of refresh you for a moment here on the 2 different pathways and kind of where you see this serving the stakeholders that you're working with. And Nisha, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm happy to start. I'm particularly excited about the sector and product type specific sort of surveys. And so this to me really speaks to everyone's call to action on moving us away from measurement and towards action. And I think part of the rub for me is we have really, really excellent suppliers, a lot of people who are already experts in their field, and often when they report the sustainability data, they are averaging it out, or they are making it force fit into something that isn't actually relevant for the actions that they would take, but relevant for that reporting structure. And so the idea of this category, I think, is really exciting as we think about how do we share the information with the stakeholders that could help us accelerate those changes. So our retailers and our distributors, how do we really lean towards measurement as a tool for action rather than measurement for the sake of measurement? And I think the call out here is just we want to make sure that this is thoughtfully done, right? We lean on our experts, the folks in the group and anyone else who would like to input to make sure that we're not recreating that complexity that we are trying to walk away from, but really using additional information that is helpful and powerful towards action.
Awesome, thank you.
Yeah, and just building on that, I think it's aligning with, these global ESG, sustainable impact reporting frameworks, because those are increasingly being used across the economy to evaluate sustainability risk and opportunity. So ensuring that there's alignment there, I think is absolutely critical. I think, as we enter a time of great uncertainty, economically, politically, I think I'm recognizing that, resources are kind of increasingly scarce, and that we have to collectively recognize that every dollar spent has to have an ROI. And that, that's one side of the coin. And the other side of the coin is that the climate crisis is only intensifying. And this work is only increasing in its importance and in its urgency. And so aligning, anything we can do to streamline this process is going to allow all of us collectively to invest more time, effort, and energy into the real work that needs to be done, and driving that forward. And I would say to the retailers in the room, finding ways in which to reward the companies that are leading in this work is of critical importance as well, because that's going to create that self-fulfilling prophecy.
Yeah, I'm going to very much bring us home on multiple points that you guys just made, but I wrote an article this week just related to what levers do we still have to push forward climate action outside of policy as private businesses. And one of the most important levers is B2B relationships and aligning incentives, supply chain pressure as a driver for climate. And I really, really believe that. And the work that the ASRI is leading is one of the most important pieces to be able to accelerate that. And so when I think about the customers that we work with, Nisha specifically mentioned that streamlining reporting is really a stepping stone to be able to unlock so much more of what people want out of this whole process. And so for buyers, yes, having a more streamlined reporting process is going to ensure that you have high quality data to capture emissions reductions across your supply chain. But it's also the exact same information that you need to actually be able to inform procurement teams about what the different impact is of different suppliers or products, which is like the baseline information we need to be able to actually incentivize lower footprint products. And that's a huge unlock. And then as brands or suppliers, as Julian just mentioned, we're going to be under even more pressure to be able to, maintain margins and demonstrate the ROI of the sustainability initiatives that we're pushing forward. And that's really hard to do in a world where there isn't clear communication about what the impact of those are. So this information also serves as the ability for you to actually be able to prove a business case for why different interventions are being rewarded and why buyers are actually looking for that information. So that's super, super important, and that to me is the biggest opportunity, is that we could actually start to restructure our system a bit to have more resilient change.
Because we're not going to have time for Q&A, I feel like I want to answer a question that might be in some of your minds. So one of the things when we proposed these different avenues with the working group, one of the things that came up from a number of folks was, so what you're saying is there's going to be another platform, like we're having to report to something else. And I think that what we're proposing and what we want to look at exploring, and this is the part of this that's a little bit disruptive, which is there are a number of kind of leading platforms out there, and how can we make sure that they are also aligning with best practices? And so it's like, if you've got a platform you're working with, awesome. Let's find a way to bring them to the table and look at how we can continue to evolve the work we're doing. Because a lot of people are saying, we have a platform that we use and it gets us 80% of the way there, but there are these core issues. And it's like, the intention is not to necessarily add another layer on it. So for folks who have something, let's figure out a way to build that buy-in. And for folks who don't, maybe there is a solution there. And then part of it is also building that buy-in within our retailer community and our brand community as well. So what is the path forward at this point? So as I said, we initiated this back in the summer. We've been going through this learning process. We've been understanding and developing and kind of identifying these pathways. And really the next step is to really start to prototype it, to build these out. So we haven't done any building yet. We just have insights from the surveys. And we want to start to kind of build this out and then go through a process of rapid iteration to test it with our community and see, both on this kind of educational platform and on the aligned reporting aspect, of what can we develop and see if this is actually meeting our community's needs, and do we have the potential to actually get the engagement and the buy-in there that we need to make this really an effective solution for our community. So we are going to be moving into phase 2. As we said, we have 20 companies right now that have been engaged in phase 1. If you're interested, you can go to this QR code, and there's a very short little form there. It's literally just your name and company. I think you have to click it. It's a Google form. Fill that out. We'll follow back up with you and just have a conversation. And whether you just want to be kept in the loop, whether you want the survey, or whether you would like to get engaged, we're certainly happy to follow up. I would say it was really heartening to see that about 80 to 90% of the people that responded to the survey said they were interested in getting into phase 2 and with us. And a number of these are actually new companies. And again, I think this is a fantastic indicator of the fact that this is really seeking to solve something that our industry is really struggling with. So in our last few minutes, I would love to just do one more quick go around, and any closing thoughts, comments, anything else that you want to share with the community. Anisha, I'll start with you.
Yeah, I hope everyone takes away that there's some really bright people working on this and that we walk away with a bit of hope. I think the industry knows that we're all struggling. Everyone is feeling it, and we're really starting to take steps towards some progress and some action. It won't be perfect, but I think the first step is to start, and we're definitely doing that here.
I would say, and this comment was made earlier in one of the earlier sessions today, but the importance of building sustainability-related roles and responsibilities into people's job descriptions within your organization cannot be understated. We have a tendency to basically, if it's a sustainability problem, it goes to the sustainability people. And I think that is a short-sighted way of looking at things. And I think it's incredibly critical as we move forward that every job ultimately becomes a sustainability job, and that we're building those roles and those responsibilities and that internal capacity into our organizations for long-term resilience.
Thank you.
I think I would just share a really, really warm invite because, climate work is just going to continue to face new challenges, and I think we're all feeling that. And to me, the remedy for that is community. And this group, yes, serves the purpose of solving a very real problem in our industry, but it's also a community of people. And so I just want to extend the feeling that the group represents. And Courtney and I have done countless calls with people, literally just educationally, to talk about, challenges. You don't have to have any commitment if you want to join the group. It can literally just be a, hey, what's up? Tell us how you're feeling. So I guess my share is an invite to join in community, lean on each other in tougher times, continue pushing forward on the work, and just remember that we're all working really, really hard to solve problems for each other. So let's lean into that, and I appreciate you all for being here.
I will just emphasize that and say one of the things that's very cool about this initiative is, despite the fact that maybe the topic area can feel a little dull, that when folks are coming in with conviction and alignment, the amount of energy in the room when we're all meeting via Zoom, how people show up and how they're willing to share so candidly across company lines is really the exact kind of work that we want to be doing at the Climate Collaborative, and also the exact kind of work that we need across many, many areas in our industry so that we can continue to advance our work. And so just huge accolades for both the steering committee and the working group. These companies are showing up and leaning in to help create a solution that hopefully will serve our entire industry. So with that, thank you so much to our panelists. Please don't hesitate to reach out. We try to be really accessible, so any questions are welcome. So thank you so much.
Who would have thought that sustainability reporting could be so energizing? As Courtney mentioned, if you're curious to learn more about the initiative, please stop by our booth at the Resource Fair, which will be taking place from 4 to 6 p.m. In our next session, we'll be exploring developments at the leading edge of regenerative agriculture. Likely many, if not all of the companies in this room are facing growing pressure to demonstrate strong returns on regen ag investments at scale, making a clear path to value creation more critical than ever. With that in mind, we're really excited to present this next session, which aims to get to the root of this challenge. I'm thrilled to introduce our moderator for this session. I know many in this room are probably already familiar with Anthony Crucero. A number of you have likely participated in a conversation on his podcast. I feel very confident in saying that Anthony has likely spoken with more regen brands than anybody else in this room. Through these conversations, he's gained deep insight into the challenges and opportunities shaping the broader regenerative movement, making him the ideal person to guide today's conversation. Anthony is an entrepreneur, investor, and regen ag evangelist whose mission is to help heal our planet and people through ventures that inspire the production and consumption of healthy, nutrient-dense foods. Anthony is the co-founder and president of Regen Brands, an unprecedented education, community, and financing ecosystem for CPG brands supporting Regen Ag through Regen Brands Institute, Regen Brands Coalition, and Regen Brands Capital. With that, I'd love to welcome our panelists to the stage.
Okay. Thank you, Caitlin. I love these big fuzzy chairs. Can y'all see me, or am I blending in too much with my chair? Good? Okay. Thank you, Caitlin, and thank you, Courtney. Thank you so much for everything you do to host a day like today. Our entire industry is just very indebted to you, and so grateful for you both. Can we give them a round of applause, please? Thank you. Thank you. So we're here to talk about regenerative agriculture. Regenerative ag is at the very pivotal moment. Is that me or who? Okay, we're good. We've seen it transform from this idealistic concept to something that's showing up in corporate earnings calls and on thousands of products on store shelves now. But we're really at this critical tipping point. Will regen ag become a true market force with clear consumer demand, or is it just going to fade into obscurity as another sustainability trend that had its 15 minutes of fame? As we're here to tackle today with this lovely group of panelists, To truly scale regenerative agriculture, we need proof. We need proof that consumers want it, proof that it delivers real environmental and nutritional benefits, and proof that brands can justify the investment. So these three really smart people are going to figure all that out in the next 39 minutes, and we're going to have all the answers that we need. So strap in, okay? This is going to be good. We're going to get to the conversation here in a second, but I'm going to introduce each of our panelists. We'll start with Sherry down there on the end. Sherry Fry is the VP of Total Wellness at Nielsen IQ. Sherry brings the consumer voice to the food systems innovation discussion. Her extensive background in consumer research and work at Nielsen IQ, the world's leading consumer intelligence company, has positioned Sherry as a leading voice in consumer trends, including insights into what drives consumers' buying behavior, and in particular, how consumers are increasingly seeing their health and the health of the planet intertwined. She has been a featured speaker, I think, at every single event in the entire world, but many national and international industry events, and is often sought as a national media resource. So welcome, Sherry. Eric Smith is the CEO and founder of Audacious PBC, a company focused on measuring and comparing the nutritional quality of food. Audacious provides affordable testing and software to analyze and report nutrient density, linking agriculture, climate change, and human health. Previously, Eric led investments in business and technologies aimed at large-scale carbon and greenhouse gas reduction for the Grantham Foundation, and he has experience in climate finance, venture capital, and advisory work in natural resource management. He holds an MBA and Master of Forestry from Duke University and served as a Peace Corps volunteer in Costa Rica. I'm going in June, so I need some tips, okay. Carolyn, joining us as well. Carolyn Gahn is the Senior Director of Mission and Advocacy for Applegate and Justin's Brands. In this role, she is responsible for setting the long-term mission objectives that will allow the brands to remain trusted leaders in the organic and natural industry. For almost 40 years, Applegate has been committed to their mission of changing the meat we eat, and has pushed for higher standards in the meat supply chain, from animal welfare to regenerative agriculture. Applegate recently announced that 100% of their beef hot dogs will be sourced from certified regenerative grasslands in the spring of 2025. The program will help transition, or has helped transition, over 10 million acres to certified regenerative. Wow. Pretty cool. So, with that said, Carolyn, we're going to start with you for our first question. You know, Applegate's made this big commitment, obviously done some really cool work in the space. I think there was a little bit of trial and error that got to that.
Definitely.
So take us through, one, the evolution of the regenerative strategy, kind of starting from the Do Good Dog to now really implementing it in the broader portfolio, and also just like educate us on the business case. Like, what is the real what, why, how of what the business case behind what Applegate is doing?
Yeah, so early on in the regen movement, 2021, we created the Do Good Dog, which was at the time the first nationally available hot dog that was using beef sourced from certified regenerative grasslands. And our goal with the Do Good Dog was to, be a test case to really explore what the regen supply and demand looked like. Are consumers interested in buying products that have environmental and sustainable benefits to the land? So the strategy was to create a new SKU with a new name that could serve as the hook to capture attention, and then be a starting point for engagement. We knew we were going to have to do a ton of consumer education on this topic. We ran research insights on, what on-pack phrasing we should be using that would land best with consumers. And then we invested over $1 million in a marketing campaign, summer of 2022, to really get the word out. And we kind of went grassroots style. We, hit the streets of New York City, Denver. We slung hot dogs from our traveling hot dog cart, and talked to people one-on-one, and, really, talk to them about what regen was, why this is a Do Good Dog, and we, coupled that with TV segments, and then, trade support at the retailer level. And we found that while regen awareness was low, people were very interested once they learned about it and its benefits, and it was a reason to buy. And so the Do Good Dog, it did well in national retailers, Whole Foods, Kroger, H-E-B. And this message around doing good and regen, it was resonating, and it was serving as the reason that consumers would try it. But what we eventually found was that, we were asking them to make a choice between the Applegate hot dog that they've been buying.
Right.
They've already, known it, loved it. It already has a environmental claim on it, right? It's certified organic. And, had to choose between that and this new hot dog that had a regenerative claim that they were unfamiliar with. And so at the end of the day, this concept that healthy soil creates more nutritious, nutrient-dense foods that are better for your health, like this is not a connection that consumers are currently making. And you can go to the next slide.
You got it.
So all the learnings that we captured from the Do Good Dog, coupled with just the supply chain challenges of having a separate SKU in the marketplace, that ultimately brought us back to our mission, changing the meat we eat, right? Like we believe that regenerative agriculture is the way to make major shifts in the food system. And so we made the decision that we needed to move forward with this, and not wait for consumer demand and awareness to be there before we did that. And so these learnings from the Do Good Dog became the proof points we needed to then transition our entire beef hot dog supply chain across both our natural and organic SKUs and integrate the regen claim into the marketing and the label of our everyday hot dog. And these are the labels you'll see in the stores come summertime. But it's difficult to overstate the impact that this decision had, right? Like we went from having 260,000 certified regen acres in our supply chain when we had Do Good Dog as a separate SKU, to then having 10.8 million certified regen acres with transitioning the entire portfolio.
Nice. Amazing. That's amazing. Yeah, give it up for that. Wow. Thank you for sharing that. Eric, everyone loves to say, as soon as we get the nutrient density data, regen ag, it's going to solve all of our problems. That's the magic silver bullet. We're clearly a ways away from that, and clearly $8 million worth of investment capital thinks you're going to be the one to figure it out, so good luck.
Thank you.
And congrats on the recent fundraise. But where are we really at? What are the biggest gaps in our current understanding? How close are we to seeing this really become that silver bullet that people think it is? And you guys obviously have some data now, so what are you actually seeing in the data? What's compelling that people should know about what you're seeing versus investing in regen?
Great. Hi, everyone. Pleasure to be here. So we all know that food quality is highly variable. And anecdotally, we've understood and experienced that high-quality food comes from high-quality farms. We can taste that. We can feel that. Unfortunately, the quality of food has been deteriorating for a long time because of how our agricultural system works. And we're really starting to feel the repercussions of that from a nutritional quality and from a safety and a toxicity standpoint. So if we know that food quality is variable, we then want to take the next step to understand how big is that variability and why does that variability exist. So if you go to the next slide, we exist to kind of understand these relationships. So we all want to be able to say today that healthy soil equals healthy humans, but we need data, we need research, we need evidence, and we need brands to really step out to begin to explore these relationships. So today we help our customers to measure, understand, and communicate the unique nutritional quality of food. And so on this next slide, let's talk about what that actually looks like. So today we talk very simplistically about food. We primarily see that through a nutritional facts panel in the form of total fat, total protein, some types of carbs, maybe some vitamins and minerals, but it's incredibly simplistic. We have to go a level deeper. So Audacious is taking that next step to get us to talking about fatty acids, which is fat quality, to talking about amino acids, which is protein quality, talking about the relationship between starch, sugar, and fiber, and then looking at these micronutrient profiles in terms of their richness, diversity, and abundance of how they aid us in human health. All of those things we understand well how they lead to better human health. When we get into this next category of bioactives, antioxidants, phytochemicals, that's where kind of the frontier is and really pushing the envelope here. to summarize what we've learned about the relationship in 3 years of now working on this is there is a very strong relationship between the production system and the outcome. And here I've chosen animal protein to really talk about fat quality because it's something that directly relates to the energy intensity of how that system was managed to produce that outcome and what that outcome actually has to do with human health. With animal proteins, we're really talking about a fat quality story. When we're talking about grains, we're talking about genetics are really driving the structure of the macronutrient profiles and then the abundance and richness of micronutrients within the crop. And then as we get into fruits and vegetables, we're really talking about, again, genetics driving a macronutrient balance in relationship to soil health alongside better antioxidant phytochemical profiles. But this is data that we've generated. We've got thousands of samples generated, including management data for each of these crops. And you can really begin to see here what the different profiles of fat quality are actually doing for us as humans. And so on the left-hand side, you have, for those that are not familiar, omega-6-3 ratios. Omega-3s are incredibly beneficial for us. We need to increase them. Omega-6s are necessary, but we have an incredibly overabundance of them in our food system right now. And so what we're actually talking about is it's just the balance that is out of whack. Neither is bad in and of itself. It's just the balance that goes into our body leads to the structure in our diets that can be inflammatory or anti-inflammatory. And so what you see is high quality animal production systems that are in balance with the ecology produce nutritional profiles that are beneficial to human health. And so we're bringing this data and these insights forward so that brands can begin to market this information, understand it, and move forward with that. And the right-hand side, the standard American diet generally sits between a 10-to-1 to 25-to-1 6-3 ratio, and that's across the plate, so to speak. And that is where we're getting all of this inflammation from in our bodies. And then so just to wrap up here, this is really fascinating. We are really starting to tease apart what's happening with certifications behind the scenes. And it's really interesting to see that not all certifications are created equal. And there's a huge mess happening right now, especially in this pasture-raised, pasture-fed, grass-raised, grass-finished. It's a mess. And so we're trying to bring clarity to that market to say that, and what we're showing is the highest quality pastures that are diverse and sequestering carbon in the process are actually producing the highest quality profiles from an omega balance standpoint. And then there's just a few product snapshots on the next slide or two that just really walk through how we help brands benchmark, compare, understand their unique nutritional profiles versus the market. And that's what we're trying to bring is these benchmarks so that people can understand this data. And then the last slide here too is just, this is exciting because we're starting to see normalized distributions emerge, which makes sense. But if you're looking at micronutrients on the left-hand side, calcium, potassium, phosphorus, zinc, selenium, things that most of us are deficient in, for the record. And you're seeing on the bottom a yellow and a green where it's just giving you a sense of where 10% of your daily value versus 20% of your daily value of where that lines. And so there's an incredible array of quality producers that are delivering incredible micronutrient profiles, and they're not getting any credit for that. And it has significant implications on our human health as well. So evidence is coming. We're here to help build that evidence base, and I'm fully convinced that there is a very strong relationship between soil health and the nutritional quality of the food.
Love it. Hell yeah. Excited to see what that data looks like at next year's Expo. Sherry, you and I have talked about this a lot. We need more data about this whole regen thing. We hear about it a lot, but it's kind of a black box about how many products are making a claim, how's that being packaged to a consumer, is there any correlation or causation between that and it actually selling at retail? So we need more, but NIQ has some really good data that we can start with. So Sherry's gonna break down some initial data for us about what's kind of the state of the consumer and the brand side here.
Sounds good. And by the way, speaking of data, I'm a data nerd watching your slides. I'm like, oh, this is exciting. So, many of you know, if you want to click to the next slide, from an NIQ standpoint, we're tracking what is claimed on packages. We're tracking nutrition labels. We're tracking ingredient stacks, et cetera. And today, what I wanted to show you is just a bit of what we're seeing in terms of kind of how claims are, across kind of, production and sustainability. And, we track hundreds, but I wanted to kind of make this real clean for you today in terms of what's the perspective. And so just to orient you to what you're seeing here, across the bottom, this is the number of categories in the store where we're seeing a claim. And then that vertical axis is a 4-year CAGR of, the growth over the last 4 years, compounded annual growth. And why I love this is it gives you a perspective of where regenerative agriculture or regenerative organic certified agriculture or even upcycled, some of these emerging claims are falling compared to some of the more, penetrated claims like non-GMO or organic. So as you look at this, just kind of framing this up for you, the size of the bubble is the size of the sales. And so again, non-GMO, organics, sustainability certified, more penetrated across categories, larger in terms of the sales. So what's going on with Regen Ag and Regen certified? So you can see, rock is in about 20-some categories. Regenerative agriculture is in more around like 50 categories. The size of the bubble still pretty small, and you can see even down there with regenerative agriculture, we're even seeing more claims around things around biodiversity. Now you can look at this, and I'll tell you it's a little misleading because it's this 4-year CAGR, and we've seen over the last 4 years, especially in 2022 and 23, quite frankly, consumers were really strapped. Prices were high, and we saw a pullback. We saw a pullback on anything that was tied to better for. We saw a pullback on anything that was tied to kind of wellness overall. And we have, frankly, since Q3 of 23, seen that bounce back. And we are now seeing things around better for, sustainability growing much faster. What's also a little misleading about this chart, and sometimes I think should I adjust this or not, is the regenerative agriculture itself. So we're seeing this claim on, more and more categories. In fact, we're seeing that regenerative agriculture is one of the fastest growing claims in terms of moving across that line on the bottom to moving to the right. And we're seeing, claims like, we support farmers who farm regeneratively. Why that bubble is so low when we look at that 4-year CAGR is, and I'll just kind of call it out, it's alternative milks. And so that claim is being put on categories that actually aren't doing as well. So if you factor that out, just in the last year, regenerative agriculture has grown like 60%. So that 4-year CAGR is kind of that broad view, so it kind of gives you this longer term view, but also the fact that you've got some categories that actually aren't doing as well, that are making the claims, I think is an important element. If you click to the next slide, Anthony, I think the consumer piece is really powerful too. And so this is a look from 2010 to 2024 of how consumers are thinking about sustainability. And this is a look just from a US perspective. So as you would expect, at the very top, we've got those people that are very passionate about the environment. They live and, day in and day out, act and behave like they are focused on the environment in terms of what they're doing, their behaviors and their actions. And then at the bottom, I think the real positive here is since 2024, we've got people that are jaded, but that number has decreased. So there's fewer people that are saying, I don't care, I don't believe in the environmental challenge. Where we think the biggest opportunity is, quite frankly, across all of these segments, the only one that indexes high today for regenerative agriculture is that top group. Where the opportunity is in really that second group of consumers, which, we call glamour green, but really these are folks that, quite frankly, this is very much around this is a badge in terms of my identity and who I am. And so you could look at that and think, oh, do we want those consumers? But really, these are great consumers in terms of they are influencers. So when you get them on board, when they kind of come on board with your brand or your attribute, it becomes something that they become some of your biggest champions and biggest influencers overall. one final thing on the, we're often asked, like, well, can we charge a price premium? And so we do see, it varies across the categories. In some categories, regenerative agriculture, we're seeing like a 70% premium, and some it's only a 30% premium. So it's not, it's not across the board. I think what's most fascinating is we're just seeing growth in food and non-food categories. So that, I think you said it really well. Sometimes with the consumer's not ahead of us, right? We've got to be ahead of the consumer. But one thing that we do see is when consumers start to see claims on multiple categories, it really starts to help educate them on what it means and that they might be interested in.
Love that. And we have new categories. I feel like having a regenerative product every day. So that should continue to increase. Thank you, Sherry. Carolyn, I want to come back to you. I think you did a really good job kind of doing the overview of the evolution of the strategy, right? But I found it super interesting in the conversations we've had leading up to this. There are 3 things that y'all are doing that you're really focused on that came out of key kind of gaps or opportunities you've identified. I'm so excited for you to share them. Can you please share those 3 things with our audience here and just walk through kind of what was the gap or opportunity identified, why you're doing them, and what you're doing?
Yeah, I mean, so nutrient density, I think we all agree, is the unlock that is needed for how consumers understand regen.
The sound system agrees that nutrient density is the unlock.
I'm not going to move. I'm not moving. Yeah, and I personally have believed for a long time, as many of you in the room, I'm sure have, that that the health of the land and the soil produces a better quality product, from not just a nutrition standpoint, but a taste perspective as well. And so, but the quantification of this is really what is needed to make that connection, to best communicate with consumers about the benefits of that high attribute, ethical, regen supply. So on our regen journey, we've been, lucky to partner with some of the great folks working on collecting this data. So, Eric's work, the Bionutrient Food Association, Nutrient Density Alliance, the Almond Project on the Justin side, that are really working to aggregate this data to show that the correlation in the nutrient levels of the soil, with the health of the animal, with the nutritional profile of the product, the meat. And so since the launch of the Do Good Dog, we've started to do more nutrient density testing on our raw products, so our regenerative organic grass-fed beef. And we've seen, now we have our phytonutrient profile, right? Like, this is information we didn't have before. We've seen the lower omega-3/6 ratio, which, as Eric mentioned, is indicative of a grass-fed, grass-finished system. And so as we can do more of that, it not only gives us insights on the nutritional qualities of our products, but also gauging the quality of our supply, right? And so as Eric can aggregate more of this data across the industry in his platform, that's an opportunity for us to then evaluate our supply chain and establish that baseline and expectations to do better sourcing, right? So, and then taking this a step further, we've thinking about the human health aspect, right? Like, we still need to make that connection with human health. And so we've invested, we're currently in the middle of a human health study.
So cool.
Yeah, it's a 2-year study that we're doing with the Hormel Institute, and it's measuring human health benefits when the study participants consume a diet of regenerative, organic, grass-fed beef versus conventional. So, this has been a great experience, really excited to get these results back, which, will allow us to better understand how to further invest in what's the next step with exploring those human health benefits. Because, I think we owe it to the consumer to do that research, right? Like, we're saying these things, but we have to have that research to prove it, right? And, as members of the Almond Project, we're also supporting a scientific study to measure the soil health practices across conventional and organic almond production. So, like, all this stuff isn't just related to meat. This is across all
crops and food items. And, when we can collect the nutrient density and really make that connection with the soil health and the product quality and the growing practices, like the certification that's on the product then can best reflect that science and help the farmers, get that premium that they need for the high quality products that they've been producing. But at the end of the day, these are like super complex topics that we're talking about here. There's just not an easy way to talk about this because regen ag is not like a one size fits all, right? Like, different growing practices lead to different outcomes, lead to different nutrient profiles. It's dependent on the season, the soil type, the geography. Getting in the weeds with all this with consumers is just like never gonna be effective, right? So like we have to figure out a way to simplify this. And I think, what we can do is assign proxies, right? Like, so biodiversity, pollinators, health, simplifying the metrics in a way that consumers generally understand and that reflect the broader benefits of regen ag.
Yeah, love that. Key work. Love, you guys are really leading there, so thank you for that. The human health trial, can't wait to see the results of that.
Yeah.
I definitely want to live in a world where every regenerative product has some scientifically backed nutrient density claim. That sounds like a really cool world to live in. We are a ways away from that, right? I don't know what's causing that. Okay.
I don't think it's us.
I don't know if the sound system doesn't want to live
I
in a
was
world
going to
like
joke that it
either.
was your loud outfit, and then they brought me the thing.
I'm sorry, it's my fault. So Eric, how are we going to get there? Like, this stuff takes time and a lot of money right now. What's going to decrease that? And when are we going to live in that world where every one of these products has that, claim on pack?
Yeah, thanks, Anthony. And thank you for setting me up perfectly here.
Yeah, I got you.
No formal relationship or contract in place, so. So today, for all the brands in the room, if you wanted to go out and generate that profile that I put up on the screen, it would cost you somewhere between $5,000 to $8,000 per sample. It's untenable. It just doesn't work. So we have a huge cost barrier in terms of how we get this information generated. We implemented a business model that allows us to flip the script on how service labs work and actually optimize for batch testing and high throughput, which allows us to drive down sample costs to the floor and really make the data and the insights actually available to the market. So most of you have probably heard of Function Health at this point, but it's one thing to generate the data, but we need to really make the insights valuable to the market so that people can make decisions. One of the things that they've done that I love is biological age. You can test and see what your biological age is. And you have a benchmark, which is your own personal age. And you get to see whether you're performing better or worse. Well, that benchmark is actually missing for the food system. We don't have objective benchmarks to say what is the average steak, carrot, onion class of milk in the market. So we have to build that, and that's what we're investing in, is really building those comparative data sets that allow us to understand the profiles and then help you as brands, producers, consumers understand relatively where that quality sits. So one side of our problem is definitely the cost associated with testing, but that's not the primary business problem that I have today. The primary business problem is how do I take 250 plus nutrients, oh, and by the way, there's tens of thousands of compounds in your food, but 250 well understood, researched, science-backed nutrients and tell a story about them as food quality. And so that's really what we're working on, is helping producers and consumers communicate through that lens of nutritional profiling. And this is where we go from 250 individual nutrients into summary metrics and into grading and scoring systems that allows my mom to understand which carrot that she should be buying if she wants to get a better value for her dollar. So that's really where we're trying to bring that transparency, is really simplifying and distilling complex nutrition data into a nutritional profiling system. But the real opportunity here And it's so funny because somebody always, I've gotten asked on podcasts before and things, how have my eating behaviors changed as a result of building Audacious? And I am now obsessed with looking at the data coming out of our lab and saying, oh my God, where does this sit? And does it meet my expectations? And the Do Good Dog is a perfect example of it because I never would have eaten a hot dog before. Hot dogs were kind of off limits. And then I learned where the hot dogs were coming from, and I learned about the quality of the things that were in the hot dog, and now I will go buy that hot dog and feed it to my family because I can trust that it is safe and nutritious and delivering a healthy value for us as eaters. So once you see the data, you can't unsee it. And that's this crazy thing because we're running all these samples and I'm seeing crazy shit on heavy metals. I'm seeing lots of profiles that are just completely out of whack. And that is hidden from us as consumers. Totally. Because all we look at is a nutritional facts panel and that's the rules. So the opportunity here is really to go beyond the traditional system and really think about how do we proactively communicate this information. And just to finish that thought, the real opportunity and where I get really excited is making food a tasteful and enjoyable experience again. It's actually putting pleasure back into the quality of food that we are eating. And that pleasure is gone from everything that is mass produced in this country. The perimeter of the food aisle is suffering from a lack of differentiation and innovation. And so I really hope that Audacious can bring that to that category and help people see that there's good stuff happening and they should be compensated for that good stuff.
Love it. Yeah, feel free. Yeah. So if nutrient density is our long-term game, what's our short-term game? That's really what I want to pick Sherry's brain on now. And it's I think we've seen pretty demonstrable data that any of the altruistic community benefits of regen are not going to be our marketing engine to make this happen. There's just not enough people that are ever going to care about carbon sequestration, water retention, farmer livelihoods. I wish that wasn't the case, but I think the data shows that that is the case. So if we believe that some of that stuff is too niche, right, and too low ROI, what are some other things that regen can hitch its wagon to or align itself with, Sherry, in the short term that are booming that we can, grow with or grow from?
Yeah, I think, and by the way, that bubble chart that I showed you, I would be remiss if I didn't say if you are a brand in the room, make sure that you are submitting your brand to data providers. If you have certifications like regenerative agriculture, that's how we capture the information. So, please, that's really important. And if you're any sort of certifying organization within sustainability. So your question, what wagon to hitch to? I think there's a couple things. So first of all, from a consumer standpoint, we definitely have seen this interest in this kind of conflating of better for me, better for the planet, better for society. And it really peaked up during the pandemic, but we've seen it continue to grow in terms of consumer interest, not always in terms of consumer spending. I would say, Anthony, that it's a couple things. If you think about the time we are in right now, we are in a time of Make America Healthy Again. We are in a time of, this conversation on ultra-processed foods, GLP-1s, food additives, red dyes, seed oils, et cetera. And I think really if you kind of take a step back from all of that, what's happening is we are seeing a consumer that is paying more attention than they ever have to what they're putting in their bodies and what they're putting on their bodies. And it is actually, I do think nutrient density, how fast can you go, Eric? Because you also think about what the future looks like in terms of consumers aren't that great at reading nutrition labels, but when you think about what the future is going to look like in terms of AI and us being fed algorithms, fed our nutrient density, via algorithms. I would say though, Anthony, even though when you think about the better for, it's me first, but then it's society, the planet, right? I think the pillars of the climate and soil health are very, very critical, especially as we're looking at the younger generation. They are definitely paying more attention to the entire supply chain, how are farmers treated, how are farmers rewarded, more than we've seen before. And also, I will tell you, climate continues to be at the top of consumer concerns because they're saying, I'm actually, when we ask them why, it's because they're personally being impacted.
primarily by weather events. So these pillars are, it's not a what can we tag to, but I think the health element is a very opportunistic one right now, and will continue to be.
Yeah, agreed. And some of those macro trends that you mentioned, it'll be really interesting to see how they develop and how regen kind of flows with them. We're low on time, so I'm going to do one group question for all of you. Regen is an interesting thing. There's a lot of diverse opinions about theories of change, this certification, that approach, this claims architecture, this retail strategy. Setting all that aside and not trying to pick good, better, best, how can these regenerative brands, people bringing regenerative products to market, collaborate more to increase consumer awareness and demand? Carolyn, we'll start with you.
Yeah, I mean, as mission-driven brands, we've all made the commitment to work in service of that mission, right? So like we've all kind of taken on solving a problem, like a societal problem, maybe a problem that the consumers haven't even yet identified as a problem. And we've all kind of agreed to do hard things for the greater good. And it's no surprise that the solutions we might find are expensive.
Yeah.
But it's easier to pretend like problems don't exist. Like we could all just like stop talking about this, go home, forget about the problems, and get source cheaper ingredients. And I think but that's just not why we're here. So I think just as the expense and the cost that we kind of incur in doing this these are costs that are food systems costs that that have been externalized for decades as a tax on society. And so I think that we need to be able to talk about why our products are premium and more expensive at this macro level. And really, I think that 3 things we can do together to do that, and that's like a commitment to staying educated on the science of the problem we're trying to solve. So becoming an expert in nutrition science, agriculture, food systems, whatever the case may be. Second is, building partnerships across the supply chain to create efficiencies wherever possible. We have to get economies of scale to be able to actually make a dent in this. And then not forgetting about the farmer, right? Like our quality is directly dependent on their stewardship of the land. So, help them help you by alleviating the barriers and the risks that they take on wherever possible.
Love it. Good wisdom. Eric?
So, yeah, incredibly biased here. I got my start in this space 15 years ago in certification. So I was actually working in third-party auditing and was Christina Skonberg, who was up here at Simple Mills. We were bright-eyed and bushy-tailed 20-somethings trying to save the world via certifications. And it's been amazing to watch the space and see how it's evolved. But I came to Audacious because of label fatigue, because I was starting to see that we were starting to saturate and we were starting to really overwhelm the consumer with information that they didn't care about. And so regen to me should be your single best business investment that you're going to make for all the reasons we understand in terms of the efficiency and the health of the land and the resiliency. But we need to look for another reason to justify for that value investment. And I think that's nutrient density. So how I can help unlock that for all of you is partner with us. We'll go out, we'll look at your supply chain, we'll understand the relationship between those regenerative investments, understand the nutritional profiles that are being generated, and we'll help you tell a story, a science-backed, data-driven story related to human health outcomes that will give you the evidence base to justify the premium price of your product. And you should absolutely be justifying a premium price for those products. Don't shy away from that. Yes, it's becoming inaccessible to many consumers, but we have to validate and justify the good work that's happening on the land. And that's how you're going to bring other producers into that market, which actually increases the base of the supply. So there's people in this room that will vehemently disagree with me, but I strongly believe that you should market the nutritional quality of your products to justify the premium pricings that you're getting.
I'll fight those people for you because I disagree with them if they disagree with you. Sherry?
So, actually think we're at a very catalyzing moment in time. And I think, we heard a couple weeks ago, two major CPGs at the CAGNY conference, the investor conference, talking about soil health, talking about the soil health and the nutrition. I think with everything, that's happening, we're seeing new collaborations, new relationships. I've personally been fascinated that many of the pre-competitive conversations that I've been sitting in over the last 6 months have been with ingredient companies and food companies and retailers and healthcare providers sitting together. And so I think that there is definitely an opportunity for differentiation, but at the same time, if we are really building the food system of the future, this may be the moment where we can make major moves to collectively, big and small, together. So that's kind of my perspective.
Love it. We could talk about this for hours. We are out of time. If you're interested in collaborating to increase consumer awareness and demand for regenerative products, come check us out at the Regen Brands Coalition booth across the way. Big round of applause for our panelists, please. Thank you so much. I think we go now.
So make sure you're back here at 1:35 for the rest of our afternoon programming. Grab some coffee, grab some water. You don't want to miss our keynote with Otto Scharmer. We have a fireside chat with Jerome Foster II and Danny Nierenberg, an amazing lightning round, and a C-suite roundtable with Lotus Foods, Wild Way, Journey Foods, and Planet Forward. So we'll see you back here at 1:35 sharp.
Hey everybody, welcome back from the break. I hope you're feeling refreshed and energized for the inspiring programming ahead. We are incredibly fortunate to have Otto Scharmer with us today as our keynote. Otto's work has been deeply influential in shaping our regenerative community of practice, which has now engaged 25 companies on their regenerative transition journey. On a personal note, I first encountered Otto's work over a decade ago, and I find myself returning to it again and again. His insights are practical, impactful, and deeply transformative, offering deep guidance for those of us working to create meaningful systems-level change. Following Otto's presentation, we'll have the opportunity to immerse ourselves further in his work through a brief facilitated practice led by Jeff Boss. Jeff is a founding partner of Foment, a consultancy committed to sparking a regenerative revolution. He also serves as a fractional executive with the Soil Climate Initiative and has been a key partner to the Climate Collaborative, co-facilitating our Regen Transition community of practice over the past 2 years. With that, please join me in welcoming Jeff Boss to the stage to introduce Otto Scharmer.
Thanks, Courtney. Oh, I like that music. Hi, everybody. Hi, Climate Day. Nice to see you. So today I have the extraordinary pleasure of introducing someone who has not only transformed my life, but has influenced more than 250,000 leaders from around the world, including a growing number of communities here in the natural products and herbal supplements industries. I first met Dr. Otto Scharmer over takeout food at his house in Cambridge, Massachusetts back in 2011, where he was hosting about 20 emerging leaders from sustainable banks from around the world. I mean, who do you have over for takeout, right? If you're wondering what kind of person becomes a global thought leader on awareness-based systems change, picture this story that Otto shares in his book, Theory U. A young boy in rural Germany watching his family's multi-generational biodynamic farm burn to the ground. In that moment of profound loss, he experienced what he later called presencing, a moment of clear awareness between a profound ending and a life-changing opening, connecting into the possibility of an emerging future. This experience led Otto to a question that's now urgent to us all. What happens when learning from the past no longer serves? What does it mean to learn and lead from an emerging future? Otto's life has been shaped by these questions, and he's developed and shared an integrated approach of science, collective action, and creative processes that enable us all to engage in these questions in service of larger systems transformations. In short, his work focuses on transforming leadership and systems from ego-driven to eco-centric models. Dr. Sharma is a senior lecturer at MIT's Sloan School of Business. He's the author of Theory U and Presence. He's helped co-create action learning labs for UN agencies and leadership labs in 26 countries in support of the Sustainable Development Goals. He's the founding chair of the Presencing Institute, which offers innovative tools to lead from the emerging future. That means sensing and acting from our highest potential to bring forth a future that depends on us. He'll be sharing 7 presencing practices with us in his talk today. Already interested to learn more? So there are 2 more opportunities to engage with Otto's work during Expo. Tomorrow morning, we're hosting a workshop with Otto from 8 till 10 that's hosted by the Climate Collaborative, and there'll be information to register up on the screen shortly. Also on Friday, I'll be co-hosting a panel with a number of other folks that are facilitating innovative pre-competitive collaborations in the industry that are bringing Otto's work to life in the industry today. So amid unprecedented disruption and an accelerated poly crisis, has there ever been a more important time for this work than now? And in a sea of unending noise and numbing, Otto and the Presencing Institute's work is a beacon of inspiration, of hope, and collective action. With great honor and genuine excitement, please welcome Dr. Otto Scharmer.
Thank you, Jeff, and good afternoon, everyone. Jeff mentioned this moment when I saw, as a young person, the family farm burning down. And so, as we all know, today kind of something else is on fire, kind of something much larger. And what I want to perhaps be in service of with my remarks is to offer you a systems thinking based lens to make sense of what's going on today and maybe help us also collectively to respond to the current situation in a more intentional and collective way. I want to open with this one. When a small system is far from equilibrium, small islands of coherence in a sea of chaos have the capacity to lift the entire system to a higher order. So Ilya Prigozhin, who articulated this well in non-linear systems, well-known principle of tipping or bifurcation points, when we enter into the current moment, we know there will be no shortage of the chaos part of this. In a sea of chaos, small islands of coherence have the capacity to lift the entire system to a higher order. So what I would like to explore is really how we can focus and activate more of our collective agency in that regard. When we look at the current moment from a systems thinking, I grew up, so in terms of islands of coherence, this is kind of where I grew up, a farm in northern Germany, a very old place actually, some 800 years ago, founded by a monastery. And almost 70 years ago, my parents decided to move that farm from conventional to regenerative, to biodynamic. And that put them on a path of a lot of headwind, a lot of setbacks, crop failures, kind of isolation, kind of from your community, and so on and so forth. And what was it that kept them going in spite of all this adversity? And I think at the end of the day, what kept them going is the commitment to the soil, to the commitment to the quality of the land and the living aspect kind of the land and the farm as a living ecosystem. So looking at the current situation from a systems thinking lens, we all know kind of what's currently going on. In most larger systems, we collectively create results that nobody wants. We know this as polycrisis, the ecological divide, the social divide. We don't need to explore more kind of, everything around that. And in fact, kind of you're one of the movements really addressing both of these things. But what is perhaps worth mentioning is kind of this third divide, which has to do with the pandemic of mental health that we currently see. And for me, the number one problem that I try to focus on is not, in many ways, what we see in these other areas, the ecological, the social divide. That's not a big surprise for anyone who paid attention. But what is our major problem today, I believe, is the illusion of insignificance, is the idea that this is so big, so massive, what's coming at us, whatever I do doesn't make any difference. Therefore, it doesn't matter. Last year, in the most recent Human Development Report by the UNDP, those two numbers were published, 69 and 68. 69% of people on this planet right now say that they are willing to sacrifice part of their personal income to address climate change. 69. Almost the same number also say that they feel and experience a complete loss of agency, particularly of collective agency. So I want to make it change. I want to be part of a different story of the future, but I don't know how. And that is a little bit kind of the backdrop of my gateway into systems thinking. When I came to MIT some 30 years ago, this was kind of, and we know kind of systems, why does systems thinking matter? And that's really what attracted me, is it's not enough to react against the symptoms. We need to understand and address the root issues. And this was the standard model back then, right? Structures, there's like structural root issues. And then, of course, where do these structures come from? From underlying paradigms of thought. But I always thought, well, there is yet a deeper layer that has to do not just with mental models and frameworks, but with the deeper sources from that we operate. Sources of our creativity, of our energy, of our identity, our sense of who we are and why we are here, what it is we are here for. And of course, all that needs to be embedded in a process that allows us to connect to these deeper sources and then move, from this connection, begin to act and co-create differently. So these 4 levels you see up here are, in a way, what you could say it's a framework of deep systems change, of stuff we see going on everywhere, really. And I would summarize this framework of deep or awareness-based systems change with these 3 principles. 1, you cannot change a system unless you transform consciousness. So let me put that more in a McKinsey way. That is perhaps more accessible. You cannot change a system unless you transform the mindsets of the people who are enacting that system. Because if you don't, the same people in a new structure will recreate the same problems. So the real question is not that. The real question is how. And this is what, as an action researcher, I have learned over the past 2+ decades. You cannot transform mindsets or consciousness unless you make a system see and sense itself. So unless you really kind of create an environment where this kind of deeper self-reflection on a collective level happens in one way or another. Of course, the seeing itself was always the main part of systems thinking. Any kind of mapping method does that. But the sensing is really what we all learned, right? Unless I feel kind of what it feels like on the other side of the divide, I'm very unlikely to do something real kind of my end of the, on my end of the situation. And lastly, you can't do any of these things unless you sense and co-create the emerging future. And then it really gets to the essence of leadership. The Indo-European word root of the English word leadership means this, literally. Stepping forth. So you step forth from one world that you know very well into another world that will only come into being if you have the courage to move into this territory of the unknown. And that, of course, is related to the essence of all great entrepreneurship and creativity, right? That we move into some uncharted territories. And what allows us to do it? To sense it, to feel it. So basically, this third principle says something very simple. Can you feel the future, right? In order to shape the future, we need to first feel it. Because only that feeling, that resonance, gives us the confidence to take that step. So in exploring this deeper dimension of leadership and change a little more, I came across a number of change makers. So I talked to 150 innovators and people who created new something in their fields. And what I realized is, if you really listen to these people and work with them, they talk about a deeper dimension of what it means to bring about change. And one of them, Bill O'Brien, kind of articulated his key learning about all his stories of successes and failures with this principle. The success of an intervention, the success of what I do as a leader, depends on the interior condition of the intervener. So the success of what I do as a change maker depends on the inner place from that I operate. And when I heard that, I thought, wow, what's he really talking about? So in leadership and change, we know everything about the what, right? Kind of the what leaders and change makers do. We know a lot about the how, the processes. But what do we really know about the deeper source dimension? And how can you even map that, if there is something like that? So that was, really an eye-opener to me. And today, I would map it, right, in terms of these three capacities: open mind, open heart, open will. So it's basically three instruments of inner knowing, or three inner instruments of knowing. And the tuning of these instruments, that we also refer to as accessing our curiosity, compassion, and courage, is a critical gateway kind of to cultivating that, or to shifting that inner place. And that's essentially kind of spelling that process a little bit out. That is the book that I published 20 years ago called Theory U. It's basically like kind of this deep change process around these principles. However, and I truly think that this is mapping kind of the deeper territory of change that we deal with interpersonally, but also on a systems level. But when we pay attention to what we have been seeing playing out the past few years, let's say the past decade or so, what do we see? Pretty much the exact opposite of what I just shared with you. So it's not kind of the opening of the mind-heart-will, but it's a freeze reaction. It's a closing of the mind-heart-will, AKA a huge amplification of misinformation, hate, and fear. And so instead of going down the U, seeing, sensing, and co-creating from there, we see denial, not seeing, and desensing, right? And moving us into a different cycle. The power of this other cycle we have seen. So if you look at the charts, the trillion-dollar companies, many of them run with a business model that is based on maximizing user engagement by amplifying hate, anger, and fear. So we know that is very real as well. And what I'm basically saying is this. If we as change makers and leaders face disruption, we have a choice. We can respond to that situation by turning away and closing down, or by turning toward and opening up. And when we turn away and close down, we activate one kind of process that by now we all know very well. And when we turn toward and opening up, we activate another kind of process that by now we also know very well, particularly from our own experiences. So when you look at these two social field dynamics and social system dynamics, what really is the difference? One is based on basically bringing up the walls on an architecture of separation, and the other one is on the architecture of connection. But then, what is the independent variable based on which we either activate one of these cycles or the other? And I would say that independent variable is the inner place from that we operate. It's kind of our own awareness. And the distinction I want to offer you here is ecosystem awareness versus ecosystem awareness. And ecosystem awareness is essentially an awareness that is generated from inside my own bubble, kind of from inside my own system. While ecosystem awareness is an awareness that is generated from moving beyond the boundary of my bubble, the boundaries of my system, by accessing curiosity, compassion, and courage. So, okay, so both of these are real, but how can we really be more intentional in this deeper territory of leadership? And perhaps the main insight I had over the years is something very simple, right? It's this, what you see here. There are two different sources of learning and two different sources of leadership. One is the past, the other one is the emerging future. And pretty much all our learning processes that exist are based on reflecting the experiences that we got, which are the experiences of the past. And yet, pretty much all the profound innovations that we generate are generated by a different process, right? A deeper process. So what I really try to understand the past 2 decades is what really does it take to learn and lead from the emerging future? And what I learned is this: it takes a journey. A journey that is both an outer journey and an inner journey. And it's a journey that moves us beyond downloading, same old, and by going through kind of the stages of observe, basically kind of moving out into the system, going to the places of most potential, and attend with our mind and heart wide open. That's kind of the co-sensing. And then the deep sense making, allowing the inner knowing to emerge, kind of go to the deeper sources of knowing, where knowing comes to surface. Basically a deeper reflection environment. And then when ideas and sparks are generated from that, you explore the future by doing, essentially by kind of rapid cycle prototyping and learning from the feedback. So this is how 20 years ago I articulated this cycle. Today, I would articulate the same cycle with just 3 words. Attention, intention, and agency. Attention, if truly deepened, so if we really pay attention, gives rise to intention, to what it is that we are here for. So what is ours to do? And intention, if truly clarified, begins to catalyze agency. And of course, a lot of that kind of integration or alignment of attention, intention, agency has to do with this opening the mind, the heart, and the will. So that was basically the existing body of work, and how that perhaps may be a reflection also of some of your own experiences. But I want to move a little bit beyond that now, and invite you to zoom out for a little bit, really to look at the evolution of systems thinking. And, so the, okay, so if we could stop the order advance, if there is one. So the iceberg model, right, that I just showed you very quickly and that is disappearing right away, this iceberg model, you have seen, it has been a key tool in systems thinking the past 70, 80 years, and complexity theories for almost 100 years. So for 100 years, we have been using that really as a good, valid sense-making tool, and yet, and guiding metaphor. And yet, I always thought, okay, 100 years on, isn't it perhaps about time to come up with something new? And with a new guiding metaphor. And the source of inspiration for me is this. It's the farm where I grew up on. And if I learned anything from my parents and my father as a regenerative farmer, it is this, that the quality of what you're seeing growing above the ground is a function of the quality of the soil, the quality of the roots. Kind of that's really where all the attention is, as I don't need to tell anyone here. And when I realized that, I also realized that even though I am now thousands of miles away from that farm, I am still basically doing the same thing, the same work. Only that for me it's not the field of agriculture, but the social field, which is composed of the two same things, kind of a visible part, right, above the ground, what we usually refer to as social systems, and the social soil, by which I mean the root system, the root part, the invisible part of the systems that we see today, which has to do with the quality of our awareness and the quality of our relationships. And if we apply that distinction to our current situation, what do we see? We see all the different sectors, right? Many of which have been referenced in the discussions earlier today, one way or another, above the ground. And then, of course, on the lower half, we have essentially the quality of relationships. And you could, refer to them as operating systems, right? The way kind of how all the pieces work together. And so just to mention a few here, what I think is interesting is that when you look at the shifts that we see across sectors, it's basically the same transformation that we not only see in agri-food, but that we see in all other systems as well. And it's a shift from output and efficiency-centric, the industrial paradigm, to user and stakeholder-centric, and from there to regeneration and ecosystem-centric. So for example, in agri-food, it's the shift from industrial to sustainable to regenerative, right? Food as medium for healing planet and people. In education, right, teaching for testing, towards really education for human flourishing, where there is kind of, in the face of AI, kind of where this is a very significant beginning movement there that we are also supporting in a number of ways. In health, from evidence-based medicine, around kind of the patient journey towards strengthening the sources of health and well-being. So we had like social soil, the soil health and the human health, right? Kind of just in the earlier discussion in this room. This is really about kind of, these are two different aspects of the same thing. When we look at the evolution of sustainability in business, we started with resource efficiency, essentially, right? Then kind of innovation, sustainability as a source of innovation, like ESG metrics and so forth. And finally, kind of transforming the purpose of business, right? Business as a force for good. We see in finance kind of a shift, at least, of the conversation from extractive to regenerative. We see in technology really the question how to use AI and data as a force for good. And I would say, kind of, to be more precise, in a way that is creativity and life enhancing rather than creativity and life diminishing. And of course, all of that is embedded in governance. So by now, I may have lost kind of half of you, but I want to tell you, it looks complicated, but the underlying thought is very simple and clear, and it is this. When we look at the evolution of our sectors and systems in society, we can see them as a manifestation of an evolving human consciousness that moves from ego and silo to user and stakeholder-centric ways of operating, and from there to regeneration and ecosystem-centric ways of operating. And as we move, as we kind of go through this evolution, we see something interesting happening kind of in this 4.0 realm, which is that we are hitting on the same questions. How to develop, how to move from extractive to regenerative business models, how to move from silo to systems awareness or ego to ecosystem awareness, and how to move from behavioral patterns that are reactive against the past towards sensing and realizing emerging future possibilities. When you do this work in this kind of 4.0 realm, as you all do also, with institutions, what is it that I often hear? We are trying to solve 4.0 challenges with 2.0 methods and tools. So there's a misfit between the challenge that we face in the field and the toolkit that we have in management, but also in our institutional designs to approaching them. We are being encouraged to shoot for the moon while some of us are still driving a donkey cart. So why is that? Why is it that kind of so much is still, while the conversation is moving towards regenerative, the capital, right, largely resides in 2.0 or at best 3.0. And I would say it has, among others, to do with that we are looking at it the wrong way. We are too much paying attention to the upper half as opposed to the social soil dimension on the lower half. And that has to do, essentially, I can only indicate that here really quickly, about 7 collaborative leadership practices that are, on the left-hand side, you see the more personal and interpersonal, like listening and dialogue, and then kind of connecting with emerging futures, and the more systemic ones on the right-hand side. And so I want to, becoming aware, what does that mean? I want to give an example for that. The first one. If you take a stick and you throw it in front of a dog, what is the dog doing? Going after the stick. If you take the stick, the same stick, throw it in front of a lion, what's a lion going to do? He's turning his head and looking straight at you. So how often in organizations, in society, are we responding to challenges in the mode of the dog, reacting against the object? How often are we able to respond to societal challenges by turning the head and understanding and addressing the root issues, kind of the mode of the lion? So in closing here, that is essentially what I just shared with you. That's kind of one story that's going on. But we all know there's another story. It has to do with, when you look at the top right, the 3 unintended side effects of social media, right? Mass disinformation, mass polarization, and mass depression. The backsliding of democracy, the rise of autocracy and kakistocracy, the rule of the worst, fragmentation and war, dystopian views of the future, an amplification of inequality on the finance side, as you see there, and then hyper-extraction. When we look at the fossil fuel industry, opioidization, indoctrination. And on the soil and awareness dimension, it's really the fragmentation of the soil and of our attention that is manifesting in echo chambers, silencing, and othering. So the loss of dialogue as a culture beyond polarization. So those 11 things that I mentioned there, are these 11 separate problems? And we all know them very well, or is it 11 faces of one and the same problem? And what is that problem? And I would say what that problem is has to do, so I call it, as a working title, the matrix of absencing. So it's a way, so we are locked in our behavior into a way of operating where not everything of us, not our full creativity and presence is present, right? So we are often manipulated from outside, which is actually working effectively, and the reason why these trillion-dollar companies referenced before exist. So those are the 2 stories, I would say, right? One is, connecting us into this outer sphere, and the other one is really kind of all these seeds of the future that we experience kind of in this inner sphere described before. So summing up, systems leadership of tomorrow, in my view, has to do with deepening your attention from social systems to social soil. And as we do that, these practices, kind of these leadership, collaborative leadership practices, are key to moving beyond the divides and the silos that we often experience. So if this is true, then how does that manifest in real life? It can manifest in multi-stakeholder situations. So in high-stakes stakeholder dialogues that help, through deep listening, the system to see and sense itself. It happens kind of in new formats of where we bring kind of pioneers and investors and activists together on a country or on a bioregional level. It's, can look like this, which is kind of a format with a larger group in Santiago de Chile earlier last year, really applying systems thinking methods on 30 through 38 mappings onto their specific ecosystems they were working on. And with other formats where Mother Nature and indigenous ways of knowing are important teachers in the collective learning process that we as a larger system are going through. So in closing, systems leadership of tomorrow, I started with the questions really, what does it take to address the current moment? Deepening our intention from social systems to social soil by embodying these leadership practices in ways that allow us to align attention, intention, and agency, not only individually, but also in groups, and also kind of on the level of the collective, the level of the whole. Thank you.
Thank you so much to Dr. Auto Sharmer. As you can see on the slide, we do have a workshop tomorrow if folks want to, there's still space if folks want to join, so take a screenshot and hope to see many of you tomorrow at 8 a.m. It's going to be worth getting up early. For our next keynote, I'm thrilled to introduce two longtime leaders in the food and climate space. When designing Climate Day, we knew it was essential to include a session on how we can continue driving climate action even when we're experiencing significant headwinds. I can't think of two better individuals to guide us through the challenges and opportunities ahead, the power of coalition building, and the key leverage points that remain for meaningful impact. With that, I'm really thrilled to introduce Danny Nierenberg and Jerome Foster II. Danny's work at Food Tank has been an invaluable resource, providing critical insights and information on the broader food movement. She has a unique ability to identify key challenges in the food system and convene diverse voices to help us better understand the opportunities and solutions to move forward. In 2013, Danny co-founded Food Tank with Bernard Polak, a 501c3 nonprofit organization focused on building a global community for safe, healthy, nourished eaters. Food Tank is a global convener, thought leadership organization, and unbiased creator of original research impacting the food system. Danny has an MS in Agriculture, Food, and Environment from the Tufts University Friedman School of Nutrition, Science, and Policy. Danny will be in conversation with Jerome Foster II. We were first introduced to Jerome's work when he was named a Time Next Generation Leader. As we learned more about him and got to connect on a call, it became really clear that his insights and perspectives were critical to bring forward at Climate Day. Jerome is an environmental justice activist and social entrepreneur. At 18, he made history becoming the youngest person ever to advise the White House as a member of the White House Environmental Justice Advisory Council, which advised on over $1 trillion of investment in nature-based solutions, cutting-edge climate technology, community engagement, and infrastructure programs. From his extensive expertise as a close advisor to Fortune 500 companies and to the White House, he founded Mardell Impact Partners to cultivate climate-smart business strategies that drive innovation, decrease risk, and provide practical sustainability guidance. Also, Jerome is the co-executive director of Wake Up, using art and civic engagement for social impact. Recognized in the curricula of Cambridge University as a modern historical figure, his journey began on the DC State Board of Education Student Advisory Committee and included an internship in Congress with civil rights icon Congressman John Lewis at 16. Jerome's work has earned him numerous awards like United Nations Champion of the Earth Award, Business Insider Climate Action 30 Award, and has been named a Time Next Generation Leader and a Bloomberg Green Champion. Welcome to the stage, Danny and Jerome.
Good afternoon, everyone. I am so pleased to be here. This is one of my favorite events that I get to do all year. And I know Anthony did this before, but can we give a round of applause to the organizers for putting this together? This is a massive event, and I'm always so proud and excited to be here. And I'm really excited to be sitting down with Jerome. And so give him a round of applause. He has done some amazing work in such a short amount of time, and I'm in awe of him already. So I just want to dive right in, Jerome. We are really at a critical time, I feel like, in history. And during the Biden-Harris administration, you were part of the White House Environmental Justice Advisory Council. And I'm wondering if you can tell us from that experience, where does power really lie? And how can we use what you have learned to continue the momentum that was so prevalent over those last 4 years?
Yeah, and thank you so much for having me here today and to speak to this audience. It's an incredible honor to be here at the Natural Products Expo and the incredible work that's happening from brands and influencers and everyone in between. And yeah, to your question around the kind of lessons learned from my work in the White House, I came from a background as an activist and a person who was organizing in my community for real change on the community level. Like, we work to have across Washington, D.C. now, as any homeowner that is looking to get into, to be in allyship with the planet, they, through the Clean Energy D.C. Act, which we mobilized around, we're able to have opt into solar and wind as the default and not fossil fuels as the default. Mm-hmm. And that's my framework of how do we make sure that tangibly on the ground people see changes in their community. And it's not just about the system change that we're talking about, because that can seem long term. We also have to pair that with real everyday benefits that people can feel, and not just tax breaks, which some communities of low income and of color don't even have access to even be able to get that first money to be able to take a tax break afterwards. So I think it's really thinking holistically, and through my work, it's been about how do we make sure everyone's at the table. For, I think, 70 years, there was cases of indigenous groups and communities of low income that hadn't been heard. And their petitions, their letters had been sent to the federal government saying, hey, take a listen. There's environmental justice happening here. There's pollution burden happening in my community. And the government should be taking account of that and should be supporting our restoration. Sure. And from those lessons, I've learned about how do we take that not just from the government workings, but also to have kind of corporate support for being in communities as well, and not just to see profit as the only driver in our work, but to see community well-being as one of the primary drivers, because if your customer doesn't have good well-being, they aren't going to be customers for much long. And I think it's about really thinking holistically about these things.
When you're thinking holistically and you want to bring everyone to the table, that sounds easy, but I know it can be very difficult. What are the strategies to make sure that people come to the table and feel comfortable so that they can have those conversations and interactions? And one of the things that I think is so important is having uncomfortable conversations and making sure that people are bringing up the things that normally aren't talked about.
Yeah, I think you're exactly right. It's about having uncomfortable conversations. And I think even beyond that, having conversations that really get to the heart of the issues. I think a lot of times when we talk about sustainability solutions, we think about kind of slapping a solar panel on the climate crisis and not thinking about not just the future of climate impact and climate solutions, but thinking about the past and the present of impact that's already been baked into communities, and making sure that when we're constructing a table that we're not just listening to the innovators who are doing solutions from the Silicon Valleys and the Wall Streets, but from Kern County, California, that doesn't have access to water. And from that set of disadvantages, they're able to innovate in a way that really is about resilience and about making the community feel whole. And out of those constraints, we've seen real champions come out and say, well, we have solutions that can make sure that we never get back in this position again, and that it has long-term legs to it.
Right.
And I think it's about connecting to coalitions that have been doing this work, like the Climate Justice Alliance, like Future Coalition, like the legacy green organizations like Greenpeace, not being scared to reach out to them because I don't know why people would be scared to reach out to them, but oftentimes they aren't even communicated to when we're talking about solutions. But it's about having them there in the room and saying, how do you, being on the ground every day, working within these problems, and your NGO working to solve them, how can the federal government be a better ally? How can my organization be a better ally? And really having them as a partner in a real kind of structural way, and not just a one-off, we're gonna do this event or this campaign, but making sure that it feels really authentic and it has ability for it to be years in the making.
Right, that it's not just a sort of a marketing opportunity, that it's something that can really take hold. You talked about sort of the private sector and the power of the private sector in this work. And I wonder, we're here with so many great brands who are mission-led and trying to do the right thing. But again, we're in a very difficult sort of political environment, and it's becoming harder and harder to do the right thing. How do we, you talked about building the resilience in communities and the entrepreneurism that already exists there. How do you sort of match that up with the power of the private sector, the power of people in their own communities to be entrepreneurs and innovators?
Yeah, I really love your question. I think I want to take a step back as well and think about how kind of I see change from like a top-down view. I'm thinking within the pillars of change, it comes from people power, comes from kind of organizations doing their work, and then also comes from the public sector. And I think that within the role that private sector has been taking, there's so much growth, potential for growth in that sense, because young people are seeing the world and seeing it be unraveled, and we have for the past decade been banging down the door of every room and have changed the culture. 87% of the world now is aware of the climate crisis. They know about it in some way. They may feel pessimistic about it, they may feel a bit disempowered by it, but they still know about it. And they think that brands, everyone should be doing something, from your next door neighbor to your friend. And I think it's in this moment when the political landscape is a bit weary that people are looking to see who is still left, who is still saying, I'm here no matter what happens, because 4 years is only 4 years. And after that, we're still going to remember what happened.
Thank you.
Like 8 years from now, we're going to be like, oh, well, this brand actually was an ally with us. Let's keep working with them, because we have to make sure we have long-term solutions. So it's about showing the allyship and making sure that you're brave now. Because I don't think it is actually that risky, because the vast majority of the public understands the urgency of the climate crisis and the urgency of solutions. And it's about really building in and continuing to argue for the fact that what's good for the planet doesn't have to be inextricably linked from what's good for everyday people. And I think that, I mean, not everyday people, but for profit. And I think profit is oftentimes completely dislinked from that, and I think people just have the word, I think now they're talking about the erosion of value of products, and I think it doesn't have to be that way, because if we structure our economy in a way that doesn't have that as the main driver, then I think that is something that is quite important to do. And I've seen that through Salesforce has 1% of their time, 1% of their profit, 1% of their 1% of their product to frontline communities, and that is something that has been a great first step. Yeah, and we've seen from REI, they've been a great partners on legislation to support the SHADE Act and support other legislation around urban and community forestry. It's really showing that like we're going to be here not just for a marketing moment, but really dig deep and figure out how we can advance these issues and really bring progress.
It's so important, and I would just want to repeat something that you said and reiterate it over and over again. We need to be brave now, and we can't sort of capitulate to the things that we're hearing. But when you see so much progress being rolled back on the climate crisis, on climate justice, I wonder what continues to motivate you. I mean, you're obviously somebody who's very sort of ingrained in all of these issues. You have a spirit about you, and I can see how passionate you are. But it must be difficult for all of us who care about these issues. And I'm interested in hearing what keeps you going, what makes you get up every day and continue to do this work.
I think what keeps me going is hearing stories and being able to uplift them to national conversation.
Right.
And seeing that networks are still growing, there's people still coming to events like this and coming to talks like this and are interested in learning from each other. Because I think that's what's important, is for us not to shut down.
Right.
And in this moment, when everything seems like it's against us, we're saying, oh, we're still going to listen. We're still going to lean in because we can.
Right.
And we have to be able to do that. And I think that is what gives me a lot of hope, is this audience here and that you guys are here. But
Yeah.
I think as well, it's from the past 4 years. We were able to get over $1 trillion just from 4 years of the Warehouse Environmental Justice Advisory Council. I think we submitted like thousands of recommendations from the 32 members that were a part of this council. And from that, we really thought about how can we make sure that primacy, for example, when we're placing a petrochemical plant, that we don't give that to historically states that continue to cluster that in communities of color. We thought about real structural things, and I think that is what gives me hope, is that those structures do stay in place. That isn't just an executive order. That isn't just something that is temporary. It's something that we really have thought about for decades to come. I think that's the hope that I feel, is that we can still do that on the local level. We've seen states that have stepped up, especially California. We've seen governments, like the government of Finland, many governments that have stepped up in this moment to say, even though the United States might not be the leader on this anymore, they will be in the future, to know, but also that other governments are still stepping up and are still here. And that if we're making a product that is only going to cater to the fact that environmental regulations are being rolled back in one country, there's still the rest of the world that is still on the same mindset that our planet should be put first, and that people should be put first.
Absolutely.
And I think that is what gives me hope as well, because we're not just one country, we're one planet that's united in this.
We are one planet that is united in this, and I think something that brings us all together is the idea, all of the products that are being represented here are based on farming communities and farm workers. And that's where I see a lot of progress. I see a lot of rollbacks, but I see a lot of progress and a lot of hope. And when we're talking about those communities, they're often marginalized, they're often communities of color. How do we make sure that they are the forefront of these conversations, that they are brought to the table?
Yeah, so from the work of the White House Environmental Justice Advisory Council, we thought, since we have been able to do such good work over the past 4 years, how can we engage the private sector in a really meaningful way? So we created Mardo Impact Partners with me and a few other colleagues quite recently. And we are engaging, there's IPC scientists that we have that we're engaging with. We have incredible activists and people who've been working on this for 50 years, have PhDs that give expertise. So I think that is a good place to start, is just to reach out to us, because we have so much to offer in that space. But I think if you're looking just to create what can you really understand what you can do next, is to really understand what NGO or what green nonprofit do I know that's in my network, what kind of environmental seal that my product is already a part of, and see how you can further be a part of that network.
Yeah.
I think there's examples of sustainable forestry, and then thinking about how products can be made and packaging in a really sustainable way. It's about connecting with an organization like American Forest, which is working to advance tree equity and have the tree equity score, where we see zip code by zip code level, a person can understand where they can plant a tree in their backyard, where they can plant a tree on the city level. And for a company, they can go in and say, oh, our company is right next to a place that has a very low tree equity score, and we want to do a program here. And you can engage and work with an NGO like American Forest to do that. I think that's one example of that, and it's really leaning in on the communities that are there. It doesn't have to be something new. It doesn't have to be something that's fancy. It has to be something that feels real. Because I think people are tired of constantly feeling like things are a scam. And what feels like a scam sometimes is just constantly having new things coming out all the time. You just want to feel like, I know this organization, I know they do good work, and this brand that I also love is also doing good work with them, so it makes sense.
That authenticity.
Yeah, exactly.
We've lost a lot of that, like the genuineness that is necessary to continue this work. And so one thing that I appreciate about you and what you've tried to do is bring the arts together with activism and through storytelling. Can you talk a little bit, you alluded to it earlier, but storytelling has to be a part of this in a creative way that speaks to people, whether they're in food and agriculture or climate activism, but speaks to everyone. And storytelling really can get at that. Yeah, absolutely. I think I talked about storytelling earlier, but I think art is something that even transcends beyond language. It transcends beyond borders. It is a sense that we're able to communicate ideas really in a sense that is raw.
I feel like I've learned the most powerful lesson just by looking at a piece of art.
Right.
So with my organization, Wake Up, which was founded in 2018, we started just on voting, like just getting people out to vote, know about how they can get involved, and just education resources. But we're like, civic engagement doesn't just end when you cast a ballot, because we're whole, full people after that. We have passions, we have creativity we want to express. So we wanted to encourage young people to express that through art. So we have art programs where we support young people in that endeavor and to really nurture that experience, to know that you can have the time, you can have the resources, you can have the space to be able to create art. I think something that's I really see as the most powerful way we can continue to create change. Like from the civil rights movement, there was a quote Martin Luther King said, is that a speech that I give to 100,000 people, a poster will reach so much farther.
Right.
I'm definitely botching
No,
that.
it's great though. Good enough.
Definitely
Good
the
enough.
sentiment is that, and I think that is something that I want to continue, is that feeling that we feel inspired by the visuals around us, and that we aren't just stuck in our phones. We're able to look up and see a poster on the side of a building that tells a great story about our community and about our future. Yeah, that's the work that we really see.
Well, and one thing that I've heard all day today is the power of collaboration. And if we are not collaborating with the artistic community, we won't see the change that we need to see. And it's not just art, right? It's poetry and music and plays and dramas that really get at these. Yeah. Where do you see that going? Do you see that progressing? Again, we're in a really uncomfortable political environment. How do we make sure that art continues?
I think the art I've seen is not going anywhere, and it's actually expanding. I was just recently at Broadway for the Social Impact Night for Redwood, which is like a new musical specifically about forestry and about the power of trees. And I feel like that was something that was so powerful, is that like even in this time, like there's a new musical coming out specifically about nature. And I feel like there's so much more that we can do within partnerships like that. And getting like Girl Scouts to go out and to see a Redwood musical, or to go out and to a museum which talks about climate change, but not just in the catastrophe that it is, but in the opportunity for innovation and for restoration that's possible. I think the arts, it's about creating more spaces for that, and not just being about the doom and gloom and the sense of pessimism that's around it. Because I think we all, in this moment, know the severity of the climate crisis, but we have to have a sort of balance to that, in that we give people a moment to enter into the space and not just be passive observers. Because I think a lot of people from the climate strike movement and from we've seen incredible figures that have come and continue to be here, but I think people are stuck at the moment of awareness and not action.
Right.
And it's like, you moved from apathy and you're like, okay, I don't know about climate change. I took the time to learn about it.
Right.
Or it was kind of in the news, so I had to know about it. But now it's about how do we, in any job, in any space, in any sector, how can I fit into this puzzle? Because every job is a climate job, and we have to really understand that to our core. Like, the job you're doing should be in service to the earth in some way, in some form.
Every job is a climate job. I love that. That's the tweet or X of the day. I want to talk.
That's not my quote, but
no, I love it though. I want to talk a little bit about the rollbacks on diversity, equity, and inclusion. As an advocate for climate justice, how do you make sure that those conversations are still had, no matter who's sort of trying to censor it?
Yeah, I think. I think when you talk about climate change, DEI and diversity doesn't seem like a conversation that should be had in a really meaningful way, because we think it's just a science and technology issue. But if we look at the United States specifically, around 78% of African Americans live within 30 miles of a coal-fired power plant, and African Americans make up 14% of the US population. Like, that is a case of, if over 80% of a specific group is specifically exposed to this type of environmental harm, that is not a feature, that's not a bug, that's a feature of what's going on.
Right.
And I think that is, the intersection is that when a flood happens or an extreme weather event happens, that flood is now filled with chemicals that if you're in a wealthier community, you wouldn't have that petrochemical plant near you, because you were able to effectively lobby, you were able to effectively know about it, didn't have to work 2 jobs, and then you find out 2 years later after it's been constructed. It's about understanding that race and health and environmental exposure go very hand in hand, because they are just looking for the cheapest land, the cheapest folks to roll over. And they, in quotes for a lot of these of interviews that petrochemical owners give, they said we followed the path of least resistance.
Right.
And that's poor folks, and that's folks of color, it's indigenous folks. And I think it's about making sure that there is an opportunity to get away from that.
Yeah.
Because I grew up in Southeast Washington, D.C. Like, I was near some petrochemical plants. I know people from Cancer Alley, Cancer Alley, Louisiana. And it's like, how do we get away from it?
Yeah.
And it's about making sure we have the power and are working with organizations, working with local state actors, working with people who are willing to help, because we can't just tell a story. It's about art at that first entry point, but it's about not staying in that awareness bubble, but moving on to action.
Moving on to action is absolutely necessary. I feel like this whole discussion, Jerome, has been a call to action, but what is a specific call to action for this particular audience of private sector brands, farmers who are here, who really care about making change, but can't get to that action point or don't know how?
Yeah, I mean, I work as an ambassador for American Forest specifically, and one of the great things we've seen is companies coming out to support within our wildfire resistance work.
Right.
If you're an organization that already is working working in the regenerative space or the organic space or has packaging that's sustainable, like, we work with brands that want to have their employees come out and spend time in the redwoods and the sequoias with the old growth trees, and to really support in cone camps, because we've seen the white bark pine be almost eviscerated from North America. So we are the ones that are really organizations building that back and have been working to really do that work on the ground. We are working in New York City and in Florida, like in so many places where you can get involved. And if you are an organization that wants to spend time doing that, that's the call to action. Very easy, just send me an email or reach out on LinkedIn, and we can connect you with the work that we're doing there. And then also you can commit to actually we have the 1 Trillion Trees Initiative, where we're working to actually plant trees to support an international objective with the World Economic Forum. And our work isn't, it seems very, I would say, on first glance, you would think that it's an issue of greenwashing because it's just about planting trees. But our work is about equity, because we are planting them in the communities that have been historically redlined from 1934.
Right.
And making sure that those homeowners are getting back up to just the baseline level of reinvestment by upping home value just by planting a tree in their backyard.
Yeah.
It's by making sure that the health benefits from these communities that are right next to a chemical plant, they have so many trees in their neighborhood that's some semblance of an offset just to start that work. And that's really the work that we're doing. It's not just about planting a tree and just saying, oh, maybe it'll grow. We're looking after it. We're training the community members that are in that community to get jobs in urban forestry and be certified arborists, so that they have kind of long-term career pathways.
Yeah.
We also have a curriculum for reentry folks we've heard all in the news about how people have been fighting wildfires from prison. There's no curriculum or pathway for them to actually get back into the forestry field after that.
Right,
and we're the ones who have been working with the state of California and the federal level and many other states to really make sure that we have a pathway for them to get back into this work that they've been so brave in working towards. So I think those are my initial call to actions. And of course, if you're working in ESG work or interested in working with some folks that used to work in the White House Environmental Justice Advisory Council, you can connect with Mardell Impact Partners and just send me a message as well. But there's so much potential to get into this work. I think right now, if you show up as an ally, communities will feel so much more trusting of it, because if you wait 4 years and now it's the easy time to get back involved, it's too late. So get in, support the work we're doing, join our coalitions, and come out to a tree planting if you can.
Thank you so much, Jerome. Give him a round of applause, please. You're an inspiration. Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Our next session brings together 5 thought leaders driving climate progress across the food and agriculture sectors. These industry leaders are tackling critical challenges and opportunities in regenerative agriculture, climate-aligned finance, and market transformation. We're honored to feature Ryan Pintado-Vertner, founder of Smoketown, Lauren Tucker, project coordinator from the Almond Project, Tina Owens, Regenerative Ag Systems at Transformational Investing in Food Systems, or TIFS, Nick Gardner, Head of Partnerships and Community at Premiums for the Planet, and Megan Westgate, Founder and CEO of the Non-GMO Project. The intention of the lightning round is to introduce you to new ideas and initiatives to enhance your climate efforts while highlighting frameworks that can support a more expansive vision for climate action. With that, I'm thrilled to welcome Ryan to the stage.
Regenerative has the advantage. I know it may not necessarily feel that way right now to some of you. It may feel like this is game 6. We lost game 6 and out of a 7-game series. But I sincerely believe that regenerative has the advantage. Why do I think that? I had the privilege to get a chance to interview over 10 leaders and marketers in the regenerative movement, and I wrote a white paper about it. Coming out of that, I had a ton of confidence and positivity about what regenerative is capable of. And first, I want to start with laying out a couple of facts. Fact number 1 is that healthy soil increases the nutrients in our food. That is proven. That's no longer debatable, which you heard about earlier today. The second critical fact is that farmers, regenerative farmers, can make the soil healthier. That is also proven. But here's why that actually matters. What's most important, and what I heard from the folks that I interviewed, the vast majority of them believe that that combination of messages, that healthy soil produces more nutrient-dense food, and that that's unlocked by regenerative agriculture, that is the message that will help us scale consumer demand for regenerative agriculture. That's the one. I then did some triangulation, I did some math. Working with some of the publicly available studies, including the most recent study by Regenified, my math would suggest that somewhere in the neighborhood of 24 million households agree with that message, or ready to hear that message, that soil health connects to food nutrition, and that that's unlocked by regenerative agriculture. Just to put that number in perspective, if that 24 million households is right, and I think it directionally is, and they only bought one thing for $7 all year long, that's $160 million in revenue from just one purchase. That's the level of opportunity that we have in front of us. And that doesn't even capture all of the tailwinds. So consider that there's been a 43% growth rate in media coverage of regenerative agriculture since 2020. For those of you who are visual learners like I am, you may be wondering what that looks like. This is what that looks like. So the orange line is the number of articles mentioning regenerative agriculture since 2020. The blue bars are the total unique visitors per month of the publications that had that article in them. And this is before even more momentum heads our way. This is before Kiss the Ground and Common Ground are live streamed for free, available to every household in the country. This is before there are any federal conversations about regenerative agriculture with the new administration. So I say again that regenerative has the advantage. It may have felt like we lost game 6, but it's game 7, we're at home, and we're the favored team. But how do we act like it? How do we act like we have that advantage? Well, here's the last thing that I'll leave you with, and it's the most important takeaway from the white paper that I wrote. We need more collaboration. That $160 million opportunity that I mentioned a moment ago cannot be achieved if we as a regenerative movement do not collaborate to make it happen. If that resonates with you at all and you're looking for a chance to collaborate to unlock that opportunity, you can scan the QR code, ping me on LinkedIn, and I'd love to talk. Thank y'all.
Here today talking about a pre-competitive collaboration called the Almond Project that we've been working on for the last 4 years. And it's been a really incredible effort that started as a basic scientific soil health study and has grown way beyond what we imagined was possible. And we're really committed to how do we bring ecosystem regeneration to almond growing, but do that with the support of the marketplace. So these are the founding partners, White Buffalo Land Trust, Simple Mills, Pack Ag, Treehouse, Capello's, and Daily Harvest. And what we started with was 2 side-by-side trials looking at organic management and conventional management and layering soil health practices on top. And when we first got started, we thought it would be difficult. And what we've learned over the years is that the practices are actually pretty simple. They're pretty easy for the farm to implement. But what we're really struggling with is how do we economically bring them to market? So over the years, the science is still going. We have a couple more years. And again, we're asking these really deep questions around water, carbon, biodiversity, chemical usage. How can we do this in almond orchards? So the science is going well, and we've added new partners. Justin's good to go. Maybe some of you all will join us this year. And we've added new projects as well. So we've started trialing all of the certifications. We did a project this year looking at every single regenerative certification out there and seeing what would apply to the science that we're doing and also apply to the marketplace. We've started nutrient density testing, looking at are there nutrient density differences between the almonds with soil health practices and the almonds that are grown just organically or conventionally. We're also putting together a farm advisory board, so looking at what are additional practices we could be doing. And all of this is incredible work, but again, there's really not much we can do if we can't figure out how to bring regenerative almonds to market. And so that's the project that we're sharing about this year, that we're challenging folks here in the Expo West community to join us on, is will you join us and figure out economic modeling? Because what we're facing on farm is a lot. In California agriculture, we have a lot of foreign investment. So we have hedge funds buying farms, we have foreign governments buying farms, and when land is purchased and then managed, and there's no debt that these farms are servicing, they have an advantage in the marketplace, and they can drive commodity prices down to a point where farms that have been in the valley for over 100 years can't compete. Small and normal-sized farms really can't compete. We also are dealing with a lot of regulations for good reason around water here in California. But what happens when we have land that now doesn't have the same water allocation is that land isn't worth as much when you go to the bank and you ask for an operating loan. So we have a lot of issues in the viability of actually farming traditionally. And then when you add soil health practices on top, all the practices we're doing, cover crop, rotating sheep compost application, all of these practices cost more. So we're here at Expo West challenging retailers, distributors, and brokers to join us, because with brands and farms and processors in the room, we're only half of the ecosystem. And so we really need you to help us figure out, in this pre-competitive, collaborative effort, how do we bring almonds to market that are regenerative and can really care for land? Thanks.
Hello, friends. I'm Tina Owens. I work for Transformational Investing in Food Systems. And we're a system of impact investors that are working on removing really big barriers to regenerative ag transformation, especially from the farmer's perspective. There are systemic things that a farmer cannot change about the way that they're lent to, the way their insurance coverage comes for farms, et cetera. Let's talk about where we're at today in the type of capital that's going into the regenerative market. We've made it through the pilot phase. We know there's value there for the farmer, for the soil, for the ecosystem, for risk and resilience, but we still have a lot of capital to unlock to be able to move the market into something that is approaching regenerative as standard practice. And the reason you would want to do that is because of the risk and resilience that comes within that system. And so when we look at one of the coverage gaps that currently exists, it's actually around missing confidence that investing and financing in a regenerative transition will fit financiers' current risk and reward standards. In other words, the actuarial data is missing. So we have anecdotal data showing that there are outcomes, but we have yet to put it through the process that is a rear view mirror that the system used to value risk and resilience. And so it's time that we talked about soil health through the lens of actuarial data for insurance, lending, risk, and resilience. Now I'm gonna mic drop a little bit here. This is the first time you're hearing this, I guarantee it. From an insurance risk perspective, having poor soil health is the same as being a smoker from a risk and insurance perspective. And when you look back 20 years ago at when the insurance market changed to include how much decades of poor outcomes are tied to behaviors like smoking, you saw a bifurcation in the way that the market addressed those risks because the costs to society were too much to bear. And we're at that moment right now, where your company's ultimate risk is in somebody else's field or forest. And I hope you're taking it into account because we can't leave farmers on their own to try and pay for this transition. These pictures are just public pictures from Iowa State University. I don't think I need to spend a lot of time telling you about these fields. You can read for yourself. On the surface, they look somewhat similar, but below the surface, they are very different from an actuarial risk and investment perspective. The one on the left is a non-smoking field. The one on the right is a smoker. And what that means is that the farmer will see less yield, less resilience, more disruption, more pests, and more crop insurance impacts over the course of the decades that they operate this way, taking from their own economic bottom line. But currently, the system actually locks them out from being able to access what they need because it's built on historical data that looks back decades at an individual crop level, and not at the system of soil health for resilience. So from an economic and risk perspective, heavy tillage, lack of continuous ground cover, and decades of monoculture lead to crop loss risk data that is akin to the difference between being a smoker and being a non-smoker, something we all understand. Farmers are your key to risk and resilience for your business. And farmers who use no-till cover crops and crop rotations are the better bet going forward. They're going to be more resilient. Their farms are going to make it through the drought or the heavy rains, and they're going to bounce back much sooner. The crop insurance companies have mapped their history of losses by commodity and their forecasted loss history. This is very new news. This has just happened in recent weeks. They know they have to act here, and they need that data to be able to show a new foundation for the system on where practices come in going forward. And it's based on very simple soil health practices that are the bedrock of the regenerative transition. So we're putting together a crop insurance private risk pool. If you source large crop volumes from this area of the Midwest, please make sure you're reaching out. And if you're an investor in the room, please talk to me. This is how we get more money into the funnel for the rest of the regenerative transition and for market maturity. Thank you for your time.
Hey everyone, thank you for being here today. I'm here to also talk about insurance, and so apologies for doubling up on insurance. I know we're here to talk about innovative solutions, but bear with me. Quick show of hands, who here buys insurance for your company? A few people, nice. How many of you know where those insurance dollars go? And how many of you would be very, very, very upset if you found out the insurer that you were buying from was investing in fossil fuel and refusing to cover farmers within your supply chain? Quite a bit more. Insurance and innovation don't often go hand in hand, but as Tina just shared and as I'm here to share, they really should. When you think about the insurance industry, it's massive. As a community, we send $7 trillion a year to the insurance market. For context, that would make it the third largest GDP on the planet, behind the United States and China. More importantly, insurers decide what gets insured and what doesn't. And in a market economy, that essentially drives everything that gets done, what gets financed, what gets built, what succeeds, and what fails. And right now, those two incredible forces are really working hard to reinforce the status quo. A status quo where farmers who are trying to move to regenerative agriculture are unable to get coverage, businesses who are investing in sustainability are paying the same rates as those who are investing in climate risk, and insurers who are making climate pledges still have over $600 billion invested in the expansion of fossil fuel. And so it creates this vicious cycle where we pay for coverage to inherently mitigate risk, insurers invest in the solutions that create risk, and when a risk arrives at our doorsteps of our brands and our farmers, we're the ones left holding the bag. And as we look at the insurance market, it's incentivized to continue to reinforce the status quo. If you take the Farm Bill and crop insurance tied to it, it incentivizes sticking with conventional practices instead of moving to regenerative. And what we want to move to is a future where the insurance model is regenerative, where it doesn't just provide risk, but instead invests in solutions that inherently reduce it. And the good news is everyone here today has a role to play and has a significant ability to drive change. The caveat is that we can't drive change individually. Change has to happen collectively, and it has to happen together. If you're an individual brand, you're a drop in the bucket of influence in a $7 trillion market, and engaging with your insurer simply won't work. But together, as a coordinated market force, we can drive the change that we wish to see in the industry. As leaders here in this room, we've pushed for fair trade, for organic, and more sustainable packaging. We've come together as a market signal and asked for better. And when that market signal is loud enough, we're able to reshape the systems that define us currently. Now it's time to do so for insurance. And you don't have to be an insurance expert. You don't have to be one of the folks that raised their hand today in this room. But all you have to do is know that where your money sleeps matters, and it's currently working in a direction that reinforces the status quo, undermines your sustainability efforts, but in knowing that, you can drive change. So if there's someone at your organization, within your network, or someone here today that has the ability to take action, start the conversation. And if you don't know who that person is, come find me. I'll be at the Climate Day reception. I'll actually be making waffles to make the climate finance conversation a bit more approachable. And my hope is that together as a community, we can come together and reshape a system that ultimately will decide our success. Insurance will shape the future of agriculture, and so let's please decide what future that is. Thank you.
It's bright up here. I'd like to invite us all to take a deep breath together. Inhale in and exhale, and allow some of your awareness to settle back into the felt sense of your body. Maybe let your belly soften, feel the ground under your feet. And as you breathe and possibly feel your heartbeat pulsing, see if you can allow any amount more space for the aliveness flowing through you. See if you can let that aliveness become a little more full and vibrant. And now expand your awareness to sense how that life force flowing through you is the same life force flowing through every other human in this room and every other being on this beautiful earth. Why do we care about carbon, about the climate? It's because we love life, right? We want life to thrive. But in this culture, we're conditioned to see everything in fragments, and even as we love this earth, we often do so in a way that reflects an unconscious sense of separation. That can show up as this idea that we need to save something over there, or that the existential challenges we face are mechanical puzzles to solve, or even that those of us who care deeply about the same things always need to be in competition with each other, tearing others down to lift ourselves up. That mindset is not true to the nature of reality and does not serve life. I would argue that the most imperative thing for humans in this time is to shift our mindset, to come into a consciousness that is centered in reverence for our interdependent aliveness. Humans have an outsized impact on life, And we also have a unique capacity to examine and shift our consciousness. That's a responsibility we can't ignore. Life needs us to be sourcing our words and actions from a sense of interdependent aliveness now more than ever. So what does it take to do that? Well, for one thing, it takes a baseline of physical and mental health, the ability to think clearly and to feel well. And that's where food comes in. Because the sad fact is that human wellness is eroding rapidly by just about every measure. And food is the single most significant intervention for restoring baseline health so that we can live consciously and responsibly. This used to be called the health food industry. I've been coming to this show for almost 20 years, and in that time, in a lot of ways, it feels like we've gotten further and further from that core concept. But in this moment, there is a massive shift happening, and so many people are waking up to the relationship between food and health and how central that is to nearly every aspect of the polycrisis, including climate change. We formed the Food Integrity Collective, grounded in a commitment to interdependent aliveness, with an aim to bring more coherence to all of the good but often fragmented efforts that so many people are making related to the fundamental idea that food should nourish life. We're currently working with our first cohort of brands on new approaches to standards and certification, and I have been so inspired by what this group sees as possible for our food system evolution. We're expanding our offerings this summer. We'll be launching a food integrity manifesto campaign and engaging in questions like, how can certifiers work more collaboratively on food integrity? And how can the North American food system come into right relationship with seed sovereignty efforts in the global South? Paradigms are like the air we breathe. They're hard to see, and that makes them harder still to change. But that change is imperative, and it starts in simple ways, remembering to breathe and ground, even here in the chaos of Expo, and maybe looking each other in the eyes a little more deeply, and just remembering to honor the sacred aliveness that connects every single one of us. Thank you. I didn't look at the clock the whole time. How'd I do? Thank you.
Oh, we're good? How's everybody doing? We're near the end of our day, and I'm really excited about the panel that we're bringing forward right now. We decided to shake it up this year a little bit because we wanted to bring our C-suite panel to the end, to our keynote slot, one of our keynote slots, in part because there is so much emerging in the field right now, and we felt like we didn't want to miss the opportunity to bring clear thought leadership to how leaders who have been at this work for a long time, how they're holding the moment that we're in, how they're thinking about it, what their playbook is. So our intention is that really this is a session that helps you sense what else is emerging, what you need to be considering or be attuned to, and really that it'll leave you with hope and strategies to inspire your work moving forward out of Climate Day. You know, it's funny because I feel like every year since I joined the Climate Collaborative, we've been like, what a year we're in, right? We've been through pandemics and more pandemic, and it's just kind of the state of things right now, and maybe it'll change or maybe it won't, but there is a lot in the field right now, right? Like we're dealing with tariffs, we're dealing with funding freezes, avian flu, shifts in the agricultural labor force. There's a lot to be considering. And so when we put together this panel, we really were thinking about like, who are the right people to sit on this stage and help share with you some perspective. So to my right here is Andrew Burke. Andrew is the CEO of Lotus Foods, a global pioneer in heirloom, organic, and regenerative rice cultivation. He assumed the role in July 2023 after serving as president and chief operating officer since October 2019. With over 30 years of experience in the food and beverage industry, Burke has held leadership positions with organizations such as Kraft Foods, Diamond Foods, Cho Chocolate, E&J Gallo Winery, and then in July 2024, Burke led the process that resulted in a transformative investment in Lotus Foods by Grounded Capital. Together, along with their founders, Carol Levine and Ken Lee, the company looks forward to accelerating its progress toward a more regenerative food system while supporting smallholder farms and their communities. Julia Collins. Julia is on the board of the Climate Collaborative. She is the founder and CEO of Planet Forward, the leading decarbonization platform for the consumer industry. Julia became the first Black woman to create a tech company valued at over $1 billion while at Zoom Pizza. She spent her early career at Harlem Jazz Enterprises in addition to time spent at Union Square Hospitality Group, Mexique, and Murray's Cheese. Julia sits on the Climate Collaborative Board, the Food for Climate League Board, and the Advisory Council for Launch with GS. She's an active angel investor focused on funding female and BIPOC founders. Julia is an ambassador for the Smithsonian National Museum of African American History and Culture. Kyle Kohler. Kyle is the co-founder and CEO of Wild Way, a breakfast and snack food company focused on advancing human health, climate health, and social justice. Kyle has over a decade of experience running, growing, and operating a CPG company, and I appreciate the brevity of your bio. Rihanna Lin. Rihanna is an award-winning creative scientist and entrepreneur dedicated to solving the world's most significant food and supply chain challenges through AI, data, and innovation. As the founder and CEO of Journey Foods, a fast-growing software startup backed by top VCs across North America, Europe, and Asia, she's redefining how companies drive action that saves money and health. A former Google entrepreneur in residence, White House staffer, and senior director at Cleveland Avenue, Rihanna has been recognized as a World Economic Forum tech pioneer, featured in forums, and named to MIT's 35 Under 35. Her expertise in data-driven innovation has made her a sought-after speaker and educator, and she has lectured at Stanford, Harvard, and over 240 stages worldwide, where she helps the next generation navigate the art of food and innovation. So, you know, we have some pretty amazing people up here, I would just like to note. So to help us to orient ourselves to your organizations and your leadership approach, where I'd like to start is with your personal playbook. Feel free to share a bit about your business, and then I'd love to hear what leadership approaches or tools you lean on to steer through complexity. We have this amazing community of practice. I've shared this with a number of you. We have 15 companies, and one of the top things we heard from folks in that community of practice is we need more tools to help us navigate complexity, because there's a lot of complexity right now. So are there any specific frameworks, decision-making methods, or practices that have informed how you lead? And Kyle, I was wondering if you'd kick us off.
Yeah, of course. I think one of the frameworks that we use a lot, and we've used a lot over the course of time, and I think is especially important now in times of great challenge and change, is the just transition framework. So if you're not familiar with the just transition framework, it's basically the movement from enabling an extractive economy to driving a regenerative economy and a regenerative business. And we talk a lot about regeneration, right? I think it's probably been talked about a lot today, and it'll be talked a lot about this week in terms of ingredients and supply chain and those types of things. But the Just Transition Framework talks a lot more about how regenerative business can be looked at holistically, right? And so that's the framework that we use a lot. Regenerative business, in my opinion, is diversifying wealth. Not only throughout your business, but throughout your supply chain as well. Driving social equality and social change as well is in that just transition framework. And so just like I believe that regenerative, farming practices and ingredients and growing makes, makes a more resilient crop. Regenerative business, in my opinion, makes a more resilient business during times of great change as well. And so that's one of the frameworks that we generally use and determine, okay, with every decision and every step that we make in our business, are we choosing something that's enabling an extractive economy, or are we choosing something that's driving and building a more regenerative economy and a regenerative business? So,
Awesome. Thank you. We can just popcorn from there. Who feels ready to jump in? Julia?
This all actually makes me think about a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. And I'm going to tell you why. And I promise I'll circle back to that. So at Planet Forward, what do? Of course, we do scope 1, 2, and 3 carbon accounting. Of course, we build life cycle assessments. But what we're really doing is helping people see the unseen through data. We use data to help our customers see the unseen in their products, in their supply chains, because once they see it, they can make the right decisions around it. So the framework that's really bringing me a lot of inspiration right now is one that I talked to Lara Dickinson a lot about from OSC, which is data-driven stories of impact. Like, how do we shift markets? How do we shift preference? How do we shift consumers towards something better for them? We have to use the data and we have to use the storytelling. So the framework is data-driven stories of impact. Why is that like a peanut butter and jelly sandwich? Well, a data story alone, that's just like a peanut butter sandwich. It's very substantial, it's high in protein, but it's dry. I mean, it's just dry. And a storytelling sandwich alone, that's like a jelly sandwich. It's sweet and it's lovely, but it just leaves you feeling totally hollow. There's no substance to it. So when you put the data and the story together, it's like putting the peanut butter and jelly together, and you're creating something that's so much bigger than any of the individual parts itself. So that's really what's giving me a lot of energy right now, is data-driven stories of impact and the way that we can use data to help shift markets, shift preferences, and hopefully shift the world.
Great, thank you. Andrew?
Yeah, so I think one of the tools that the company thinks about is just as you come into a new situation or a new company, I think you should take a objective assessment of your company. There's no other better time than when you're new to run through your company and understand every single facet of it. From how you go forward to the consumer and the customer to how you build your supply chain. And I think the great thing about this kind of objective assessment is once you get that assessment, it's going to be critical for what we're talking about today, which is what I would talk about as almost market shocks. There's going to be things that are going to hit you that you're going to be in a much better position to deal with and potentially prepare for if you've done this upfront work about the assessment of your business. And you're going to see where the opportunities are, where the weaknesses are, where the strengths are, and then you're going to be able to prepare for those shocks. And what I would say is that with any of this, particularly with market shocks, I think there's opportunities that come out of these shocks for small companies that do this assessment. And I'll give you an example. So when I started at Lotus, I was there for 6 months before COVID hit. COVID hit and every rice kernel in the planet was sucked out of the supply chain system. And so everybody was on the phone with all of our suppliers. And because of the fact that Ken and Carol, my founders, had 20-year relationships with our supply partners, they answered our call. They filled our stocks. And then because we were working on developing some customers in different markets, we saw that their private label brands were not able to fill out their shelves. And so we went and we said, hey, we can help you here. And it was an opportunity that grew out of a shock and that moved our business forward. And so that's, I think, one of the things that the assessment can do to kind of help you prepare for those shocks.
Thank you. Rihanna, how about you? What's your personal playbook when navigating? I mean, my goodness, you navigate a lot of complexity in your work, so.
I really think, of course, we know we're in unprecedented times, and for us at Journey Foods, we've always been focused on rapid prototyping, rapid innovation. We have a core of our company called Journey Labs that at any time a fourth of the team is working on a project that's not like core to our business model or to how we sort of market ourselves. And this usually comes from an upswing of customer complaints, right? And so when we first had a major breakthrough with our product, it was around not just focusing on nutrition or getting supplemental sustainability data. We went in very deep into cost data about 4 years ago. And this has been the biggest multiplier for us on the revenue side, and it's been something that every customer, even if they're just trying to reformulate for better nutrition in their products, will always say, we need to manage costs, and you know, this is why we're partially on stage right now, is that the decision making and actionability of many of the companies today is around their sensitivities to the supply chain and the affordability and the accessibility to these better for you, better for the environment products. And we have been doing this with products that, you know, at the time don't seem like they're going to get to the market or there's not enough demand, but usually within 18 months, we'll see an upswing in that. We're doing that right now with packaging and testing some other products within Journey Labs. And I think it's something that many companies should explore. It's like having a small core team. I mean, it's something that, you know, very large universities, R1 universities and very large private companies do. But if you're, you know, under $100 million, like think about having this, you know, rapid innovation prototype team that's working on a very lean budgets that are looking outside of your core product. And I think, you know, you can find that there's probably some part of the future you can predict with some of the customer inquiries around market demand, around uncertainty, which a lot of people are going through again, you know, 4 or 5 years post-pandemic.
You know, what that brings up for me is it's interesting. In my framing, one of the things I didn't mention is just this access issue and the fact that the cost of food, in particular the cost of really good quality food, continues to go up. And that when we look at all of these market forces that we're discussing, you know, that impact on people actually being able to access high quality, organic, regenerative foods, whole foods, it becomes more and more prohibitive. And I feel like oftentimes we don't look at that. And certainly that's a critical part of the landscape that we're in right now. So I feel like there are so many things we could dig into, but I even heard teased this morning in the policy session about the fact that we were going to be talking a little bit about tariffs and having the opportunity to hear our esteemed panelists weigh in. Andrew, I thought I would start with you because, you know, you've been through this before,
Yep.
and I would love to know just kind of how are you approaching it based on the School of Hard Knocks that you've already graduated from?
Yeah, so if I go back to that assessment, you know, of a company, when you come into a company, you know, I think what I would say about Lotus as I did the assessment was supply chain resiliency was an area of opportunity for us. And that is a really hard thing to do. And it's to broaden our network, to find the right co-manufacturing partners, to then build up the rice supply around those co-manufacturing partners that meet our specifications, that meet kind of what we're trying to do as a company. That is really, really hard work, and it takes an unbelievable amount of time. And so we've been working on it since 2019 when this first came about. And so it's hard, painful work. But what I would say is, again, back to the glass is half full part, which is there's an opportunity in that. There's no better time than when you're rebuilding your supply chain to put in sustainability programs and to think through how this thing is going to work. And you want to make sure that you're making it as efficient as possible to kind of make sure that you can bring to market great food that's at a value for consumers. And so that is the work that we do, and that is the work that we're doing. And you know, there's a ton of work to be done and to be executed, but you know, we're stepping down those paths. And what I would say is just the last thing, which is don't forget about those partners that got you there. So if you have to rebuild your supply chain, often these market shocks impact people in a way that's not their fault about how they're being impacted. So make sure that you're being transparent with them. Make sure that you're trying to work as hard with them as you are building your new supply chain at helping them transition to the new reality that's going to happen going forward. And I think you always want to make sure that you leave a partnership with a thought of how you would enter into it. And so those are things I think we can all kind of think about, particularly in this time when there is so much change out there.
I really appreciate that. This isn't the first time we've had Lotus on the stage, and I think the orientation towards supply partners, and when we think across the scope of our work in terms of climate and regenerative ag and organic, those partnerships and continuing to really sustain those and nourish those, I think is really critical in all types of weather, so to speak. Rihanna, maybe I'll start and kind of go this way. How about for you? How do tariffs and considerations around them, is that impacting your work at all?
You know, we've been thinking about how to model in like geopolitical change into our like predictive pricing models for customers. So like when you use Journey Foods, you can bring in existing recipes or generate new recipes with us, and we match you to, we develop scoring around nutrition, and then we provide analytics around costs and cost predictions for those products and for those ingredients. And we first started looking at like weather models, droughts to like influence location, customs data to influence some of those models around costs, and which ties into tariffs now. And so that was in some ways built out, and I think late October or so we started testing what it would look like to add tariff data into these models, and they're just now starting to come out for us. And now been tracking it very heavily because I really truly believe in the future of American strength is based around, you know, the whole strength of North America, where as a region, Canada, United States, and Central America and Mexico are sharing and producing the majority of what we consume here in the United States. And for me, it's very interesting to see such a turn of events for something that can be so powerful in the whole sort of global landscape, is, you know, to push back against our neighbors with these tariffs that, you know, going into effect today, really. And so for us, I think it's important to help and serve and communicate that with our customers. So we've been communicating that in demos, we've been communicating that in our newsletters, and I think that's helped bring some leverage and sort of trust to our customer interactions as well.
Yeah, I can really see the value that data could provide, you know, kind of at the intersection of so many of these different considerations. How about for you, Kyle?
Yeah, I think it's really just accelerated a lot of the conversations that we've already been having in our organization about how can we support our local economy more where we're operating. So we're a Texas-based company. We self-manufacture everything there in Texas, and so a lot of the conversations that we've been having are how can we support that ecosystem a lot more? How can we bring more of our supply locally to us or regionally to us? And we're very much still in startup mode as well. And so how I like to think of it, and how I like to have our team think of it, is how can we act quickly but think long term, right? And so how can we still act very much like a startup and think fast and be nimble and be quick, but think about the long-term implications of it, because the work that we're doing is all very, very long term, right? And so if we act slowly but think short term, I think we're all going to be doomed, right? Especially in this environment. And so, you know, one, it's about, again, supporting the local ecosystem in which we're operating in. What impact does that have on our product innovation pipeline, our ingredients, our supply chain, any future products that we might think about launching? And also, you know, as we think about those things, how can we just think about acting quickly, but also thinking in terms of how does this impact our business long term? Because again, this work is never going to be finished. I think a lot of this work is very, very long term, especially the work around regenerative supply chains and building those types of things. And so I think you really have to have a long-term approach to it. It becomes very, very easy as a leader to make short-term decisions. But I think that those are going to come back and really bite you and negatively impact you in the long run. And so yeah, it's one, a tactical shift to bring things more local and domestic, and then a mindset shift to think quickly, or act quickly, but think more long term.
Yeah, I really appreciate that. I think that it's one of the things that we have been really holding ourselves accountable to is we have to be attuned to what's happening right now. But if we're all in the place of just being reactive and we're not playing the long game here, right, what we don't want to do is undermine our long-term success as well. How about for you, Julia? Where do tariffs kind of play in, like considerations around that play into the work at Planet Forward?
Yeah, I mean, what you said about building for the long term really resonates for me. So, Planet Forward is a solutions provider. We support the brands, we support the retailers, we support the food service companies, we support the suppliers. So when I was coming onto stage, I was really thinking, what's the relationship between climate and sustainability programs and tariffs right in this moment? And I think also what you said, Andrew, is really important, that really the cornerstone of a solid sustainability program is supply chain resilience and traceability, right? Mm-hmm. That's the cornerstone. You have to map out your supply chain, not just your tier 1, your tier 2, your tier 3. That's really the foundation of building a climate program, isn't it? Well, that's also the foundation of building a resilient supply chain in the face of geopolitical shocks and tariffs and the rest of it, right? When you actually have visibility into where your supply is coming from, you can start to remove sole supplier risk. The other foundational piece, aside from building a resilient and transparent supply chain, is building those relationships. Again, this is the foundation of a good sustainability program, right? It's about engaging your upstream suppliers to say, hey, let's talk about renewable energy. Let's talk about regenerative organic agriculture. Let's talk about lightweighting packaging, right? It's a conversation, it's not a demand. And that's also the kind of conversation that you need to be having to survive some of the shocks that we're seeing around the tariffs right now. So I think supply chain resilience and traceability and effective communication with your suppliers are the cornerstones of both of these really important things that leaders are navigating right now.
Yeah, it's really amazing. It is very much, when I think about the sessions we've had today, it's such a through line in so many of the conversations we've had. Julia, I want to stay with you for a moment and just ask you, beyond tariffs, and I know we've laid out a number of different considerations right now, what else do you feel really attuned to? Like, what else are you really paying attention to right now or taking into consideration as you do your planning and think about the strategy of your organization?
Yeah, I mean, for those of you who had a chance to attend the session earlier today on the Aligned Sustainability Reporting Initiative, I think this is an example of collaboration in action. And what I'm really, really tuning into is collaboration, not performative collaboration, where we just like wink at each other at a trade show and then see each other again the next year. I'm talking about the kind of collaboration that can sometimes feel a little bit uncomfortable, the one where you have to make trade-offs, the one where you have to sit shoulder to shoulder with your closest competitor. Because the truth of the matter is, although you're right, I've been to, this is my 7th Expo, there's never a year where you turn up and you're like, oh, everything feels so perfect this year. There's always something weird going on in the world, that's true. I will say this year feels particularly fraught, the moment that we're living in. And I really think the only way through it for all of us, for not just as individuals within companies, not just as individual companies within an industry, but for our whole industry to continue to flourish and thrive, really the only way through it is radical collaboration. And that's what I'm really tuning into right now.
Great, thank you. How about for you, Andrew? Is there anything that you're feeling really attuned to? Anything that you want to say that's going to kind of disrupt our thinking or considerations for what we need to be paying attention to?
Well, I think we're not so in tune. I think we're more about, I think that whole concept of organizational resiliency is a great place that we spend a lot of time on. And it's about making sure that we're looking at our structure and how do we invest to create the scalable infrastructure that can allow us to scale our impact. And again, at Lotus, we're all about the smallholder rice farmer and making sure that we're promoting regenerative rice growing practices with those smallholder farmers. And so we're trying to bring our brand into new markets in front of new customers and new consumers, and we have to support that, and that requires money as well. And so what I would say is you have to think about where your money comes from. And it's maybe one of the most important decisions that you're going to make as a leader in an organization is who you're aligning yourself with in terms of partnerships because to me, it's really hard to build organizational resiliency without those funds to invest in that process. And so for us at Lotus, on the debt side of the business, we work with a company called RSF, and we've been working with them since 2012. And put simply, Lotus Foods would not be here today without them. They are a really terrific partner, and they've been there for us for a long time. And then last spring, we were able to announce really a transformative equity investment into the company by a company called Grounded Capital. And if you know anything about my founders, they take the long-term view. And so we took the long-term view when it came to equity. And so we spent 3 years looking for the right partner and exploring all these different alternatives for how we could go about funding the company in a way that was in line with the purpose of the company in terms of supporting these smallholder farmers. And Grounded Capital rose out of that process. And I think the piece of advice I would give to people is if you're going to go out and you're going to think about talking to a debt partner or an equity partner, in the diligence round, make sure you listen very closely to the questions that they're asking. It'll come through really where their focus is. And Grounded Capital really rose at that point because we spent all of our time in diligence talking about the health of systems, and that's what we're all about. And so we're super lucky to have them on the team and the three of us going forward to scale our impact for the company.
I just want to connect some dots here because I had the opportunity to meet with each of you beforehand, and I think that this connection point between collaboration and also considerations around partners, and that in these times of disruption and complexity, that one of the ways it seems like is a through line for everybody is how you build that resilience through these partnerships and collaborations that essentially allow us to deepen our bench, and rather than functioning completely independently, that these core partners and collaborations are so essential. Rihanna, when we met, one of the things that you shared, and I don't want to steal what you're attuned to because it might not be this, but you said something that actually kind of blew my mind, which was you were talking about your awareness and paying attention to the impact of AI. And I haven't mentioned that at this point, but certainly based on what you said to me on Zoom, I was like, wow, if I was a CEO, I would be thinking about that right now. And I was wondering maybe if you'd be willing to share just a little bit about that.
I'll have to pull that in and try to remember because there's so many things that I think about AI now in terms of, one, the need for us to probably build sort of an ethics collective, even just in food systems. Around the impact that it's going to have in workforce, in the economics of all of the jobs that we work in today. But one thing that I think I mentioned was that even my company is spending less money on the same roles and the same amount of, we're spending probably, I would say over the past year, probably 20-30% less than we were spending in 2022 and 2023. And for me, it's happened at a much faster pace than I expected. Even though in 2019, you can see me doing interviews about the fact that we're probably going to replace 2 out of 3 food scientists at every company with Journey AI. And that's when the concept of AI in food really started to take off, and we had some CEOs start to call us before we fully launched. I knew that there was a little bit too much pushback from the food scientists I was meeting around the world, saying that you can't really replace essentially the neural networks that work to understand how we bring better food to the market. And I thought to myself, well, if we could get just a core of that replaced, but also replace some of the job of a procurement manager, which you don't you don't train or go to school or develop a career in both of those areas together. Usually you work on the R&D department or you work on the supply chain side. And I figured that if we just start, with testing fruit snacks or, a plant-based burger or a simple beverage, or replacing sugar through AI, like perhaps we could break into a little bit more downstream impact, right? So if we're replacing a few hundred jobs, how much better could we help impact down the stream, like millions of people and their consumption, right? If a lot of companies are serving millions of people every single day, then perhaps we have to jump the gun and think, okay, we're gonna have to come together, solve issues around income, job loss, workforce changes. But more than that, AI can probably help us solve environmental challenges more quickly, solve nutrition and consumption challenges more quickly. And I think that's something that we really have to think about, that there's much larger, more complex issues that we can face and solve in a rapid timeline if we really collaborate to do that. But there are going to be some losses, and I think that's why we have to be very mindful of the fact that we are very ambitious in these rooms. But there are going to be a lot, and we're starting to see a lot right now with the decisions that are being made with the administration, but where the investment in tech can really take us.
Yeah, I definitely feel like I walked away from that conversation that we had, and I think my core takeaway is, again, and I realize this has been in front of us for a while now, but is, how is AI going to impact our industry, and really thinking, from seed to shelf and beyond, like what are all the impacts there? And then when I think about the organizations we work with, and I think about the people and the work, folks who are sustainability practitioners, like how is it going to impact their role? How can they be skilling up as well? And just the range of considerations, and some of these are, I don't think that positive and negative is the right binary there, but there's considerations on both sides, I think is what I'm trying to say. Kyle, I'm curious for you, beyond the things that we've discussed, what else do you feel like you're really attuned to right now? Like, what are you really paying attention to when you think about Wild Way and what's emerging?
Yeah, I mean, when I think about resiliency, I don't think that you can talk about resiliency without talking about diversity. I think I think the two go hand in hand. I think it's incredibly important, and not just tactically speaking in terms of diversity, in terms of supply chain, ingredients, and the partners that you're working with, and all those types of things. Those are certainly important, but more about, I think, diversity in human capital and diversity in the people that you're bringing within your organization, diversity in backgrounds and experiences and thought and all of those things, and how important that is to bring those things inside your organization. I think that's more important now than it ever has been before. And, it comes to mind because it really kind of blows my mind at how seemingly a lot of companies and organizations seem to be moving further away from that. When a time, that I think it's incredibly important to be leaning into that a lot more, and being a lot more cognizant of that within your organization. I think that that's incredibly important. And so that's something that's really important to me, and I think it's very important to talk about when we talk about resiliency, and especially now more than I think it's ever been. So, yeah.
Yeah, that definitely caught my ear when we were talking before. I have two more questions, and I'm keeping an eye on time here, so I think we'll move through them a little more quickly. But Rihanna, I want to start with you, and we'll kind of go down the line. And I'm just curious for you all, as we wrap up Climate Day and you think about the collective climate action of this industry, what do you feel is most important that we need to be bringing forward, or that's going to help continue to drive this collective action, even at a time where maybe it feels like there's significant headwinds?
Yeah, I mean, this is a global issue, but I truly think that right now we need to focus on what we can be doing and innovating around hyper-local manufacturing, local, regional, city-based relationships. One, because we need to be spending more time with each other together during these times, but also I think that, as much as I love to go visit a client overseas, I think there's still a lot of innovation locally that we can bring into the fold on the manufacturing side. And I think that there's a tremendous opportunity to think through regenerative futures, through manufacturing futures that exist right in our backyards, right in our cities. And it's something that's definitely been underinvested in.
Yeah. How about for you, Kyle? What do you see?
Yeah, I think for me, I think we really have to change the way that we invest in companies that are pursuing climate action. I think that's a big thing that needs to change within our industry. I think we have to change the way we invest in companies that are pursuing climate action, and what that means is we have to take a long-term approach to it. We have to think about the regenerative business aspect side of it. It means not simply investing in trends and competing towards a race towards an exit in which there are very few winners and a whole lot of losers, and a whole lot of things that don't change within our food ecosystem. I think that really, really needs to change. I think we need investors and investment structures that will allow for independent governance, will allow for a stakeholder-centered approach to capitalism instead of just a shareholder approach to capitalism that grows the wealth for the top 1% of people that sit at the top of the pyramid. I think that ultimately has to change, and we have to figure that out if we're really going to be serious about moving forward climate change within our community and with our industry.
Yeah, I really agree with that. Seems like I'm not the only one. Julia, how about for you?
I'd go back to something that Rihanna talked about earlier, which is this, to really adopt a bias for testing and learning. You know, I think sometimes when you're under stress as an individual, as an organization, there's a tendency to retract and to tense up and to become perhaps overly conservative. But like my mom says, like, never waste a good crisis. And often the most innovative solutions are the ones that make the most important changes to your operating model or your business or your positioning actually come during times of stress. So although it might feel challenging to think about one more new thing, for organizations that are able to adopt a test and learn mentality to some aspect of their business, I think they're going to see outsized returns.
Yeah. Yeah, I really feel that when I think about our climate work and doubling down on the efforts that we're all engaged in. And, you know, there have been times where we've been waiting for the government, and it's like, it's clear right now where we need to focus our energy, and I do think that there is power in that. How about for you, Andrew?
Yeah, so I guess what I would say is, building on this whole idea of collaboration and partnership, I think if you're at a small company, don't discount trying to find partnerships with large companies. I've seen this over my career in a few places, and we're doing it right now with Lotus, whereas we're partnering with a large kind of rice company that has resources on the ground from a quality standpoint, from a technical standpoint, from a warehousing standpoint, from a logistics standpoint, that we just could not provide to our farmers in these countries. But they can, and they have the resources there. And so I think a lot of times you just shut out that we can't do business with those folks because really what's in it for them? And what I've kind of heard from them is, if you find the right partner, they will look at you and say, the industry needs to change. There's these small companies that are changing the industry, and we need to support that. And so let's do something to help these folks succeed and push the ball forward. And so if you're in a small company and you see somebody around you that's larger, go talk to them.
I love it, love it. As we get ready to close and move to our final reception, I would love to end on a note of optimism. And I would love to know for you all, what is bringing joy and passion and optimism to the climate work for you right now, for you and your teams? And happy to have any one of you jump in.
Well, I think the joy for me, although this is a difficult time for our company because what just happened last night, is the spirit of don't freeze, make the decision, execute. What I would say is the second best decision executed well and quickly is much better than the better decision that's executed slowly and poorly. And so just execute and move forward. And that's what I think these kind of moments give us, is just let's go and let's go do stuff. And that's what we're doing, and that gives me joy.
I love it.
I really feel that. let's go do stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think there's an impatient nature to the optimism in this room. One thing I'll say is true. Every time I show up at Climate Day and I check in with an old friend that maybe I haven't seen in a while, they've done something in that 12 months in between. They've shipped something, they've launched something, they've built something, they've changed something. Like, this is a room of people that do. And what really gives me joy is being in community with everyone here and seeing not just what we feel and not just what we talk about, but what we actually get done in our organizations and how that's having a massive impact in the world.
Yeah. Well, for you, Kyle.
Yeah, I think, when I look at times of like great challenge and great change and difficulty, I think there's also, inevitably a lot of hope in those times as well, because I think that those are the things that can create a spark, right? A spark creates a fire, and so I think we're in that time period now in which there's a lot of sparks being created, right, within our industry and within our economy, within our society, and so I think it's really exciting to see, to see that hope. That I think there's going to be a lot of those sparks that really ignite a much larger fire under a lot of us to do a lot more work and a lot better work. And so I'm really excited to see the work in which all those sparks ignite amongst all of us, and I can see it kind of bubbling up, right? You talk to people, and while people are a little uneasy, they might be unsure. You can also sense that there's this like really desire to really move forward and to change things for the better. And so that's what I see a lot that's happening in our industry now is a lot of hope and a lot of sparks that are being ignited that maybe have not had before. That are people that are standing up and saying, hey, this is not okay. We need to change some things, and that's going to lead to, I think, a lot of good.
Yeah, absolutely. How about for you, Rihanna?
I have to agree with my fellow co-panelists and, just say how grateful I am to be up here. For me, it's always great to see my dear friends at Planet Forward. And I would say I guess my advice in this, is we need a lot of community and preparation for healing and just collaborative solution building. And for that, I say go for a walk. Yeah, find someone to go on a walk with. I went yesterday with Kyle and we had a great walk just talking about life and business and ideas. And, if you're planning to go and meet someone for coffee here over the next few days, just go for a walk with them and have a conversation, let the blood flow. And, that's how I get a little hope into me every day.
Yeah, I think that for those of you who missed the keynote earlier with Otto Scharmer, it's worth going back. It's actually, the whole afternoon is on YouTube, and you can go back and watch the video of that. And I think that really what has been brought forward here, and even the power of going for a walk, of like shifting your mindset and moving from a place of reacting and learning from the past to a space of designing from the emerging future, as he spoke about, is so critical in this moment, and how we do that and what that takes to actually get there. So thank you so much to our panelists. Caitlin is going to just pop up here one more time just to kind of tell you a little bit about what's coming right now in terms of the reception. But thank you to each of you. I really appreciate your time.
Good chat.
Climate Day 2025 to a close, I'd like to express our profound gratitude to each speaker, with special thanks to New Hope for facilitating this critical platform for dialogue, collaboration, and discovery. My hope is that today's insights from thought leaders like Otto Scharmer, Jerome Foster II, and our incredible CEOs, Julia Collins, Rihanna Lynn, Andrew Burke, and Kyle Kohler, have enriched your understanding of the potential that dwells within climate action and catalyzed your commitment to continuing to accelerate your climate work. I hope that you'll join us and many of the folks from the lightning round and other sessions throughout the day for our networking reception and resource fair, which is in the room right behind us. Thank you all so much for bringing your energy and commitment to Climate Day.